All right, so it's 6:30 on Monday, January 21st, 2019. I'll call the meeting to order, and the first thing we'll do is stand for a moment for silence. All right, is there any declaration of peculiar interest or general nature thereof?
Yes, on the declaration on application B309219 Dennings because of my employment.
And as well, I have one for the closed session, which is under section 239, 2A and C, and that's due to my wife being the secretary treasurer of the Napier Institute. Okay, so we have our first delegation at 6:30, so we're going to hop right to it. And we have Dirk and Aaron here that's going to give a Planning 101, is what we're calling it, a little overview of the planning services from the county. So I'll hand it over to...
I'll start, and
okay.
then Aaron's going to do all the work, and I will finish off at the very end.
Perfect.
About how we do it around the office. So thank you for Mr. Warden, or Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to call you.
Mayor
here. Thanks for letting me come out and join you tonight. So I know you've got other things on your agenda, so we'll go fairly quickly, but I'd be happy to answer questions at your discretion during or after. So I was going to sort of just start with sort of how and why we plan and the role of land use planning as that catches up. Really it's about better places to live. It's about your community and trying to ensure orderly growth, efficient provision of your municipal and other services, and desirable change. And it's always a balance between the interest of a particular individual or a particular applicant or a community area and that wider objectives of the community. And it's also long-term versus short-term. You have to weigh those things as you make decisions. You're trying to avoid or at least minimize land use conflicts. And I really do think that good planning supports economic development. So the role of the land use planner, so Aaron who assists you, it's to provide information and advice to you, of course, at the council, during council meetings, but also all, day to day, whether it's to you or to staff or to the public, those in the development industry. The planner helps with your administrative staff to oversee the planning processes to make sure things are moving forward. And the Planning Act, as we'll get into in a couple of minutes, is quite prescriptive in terms of the process. When you apply, you have to do certain things within so many days and that, so there's a role for the planner in that. Of course, the planner attends meetings, provides professional planning evidence and opinions at the LPAC, which is the Appeal Tribunal, which replaced the Ontario Municipal Board a number of years ago. And planners also must adhere to a professional code of conduct and ethics in how they operate and how they provide their advice to you. So the local planning service, it's an agreement that's in place between the county and all the municipalities across the county, including your township. It sets out what are those core day-to-day planning activities that the planner and our staff help you with, and then the non-core special project work, planners' responsibilities. It recognizes that none of the decision-making autonomy change. Well, the decisions that are made at this table are still made at this table, and county council deals with county council matters. It is funded through the county levy now, and however, the local application fees, so your consents, zoning bylaw amendments, minor variances, etc., those applications that are made locally, the fees are stayed locally. So Erin, as you've met her, she has one on-site office day a week, and basically functions as one of your staff persons. She's also available the other 5 days a week, or she would occasionally have time off.
Four.
Yes, she does work some Saturdays, reports with you, but so Erin's available during the week through phone and email, but she's on site here 1 day a week. We've really found that works well, so people kind of get used to that, and we'll make sure they come in on that day, or even when someone calls and they want to come in, Erin can just schedule it for them on Monday, and she's going to be here. And then I think it's important also to highlight, we do have a team of planners, including senior planners and technicians, and they sort of work in a collaborative way, so Erin does have that benefit where she can bounce things off our other planners. It's not unusual for the same thing to happen in different municipalities, so there's that sort of collaborative approach to it too. I won't go through all of the details here, but the local planning service, we do think that there are some taxpayer efficiencies to it. We think we've set up a fairly strong planning system with some of the things I've already mentioned in terms of working in a group environment, etc., and timing efficiencies while keeping that local decision making as it was before. So the planning framework, and I'll just do one more slide and then Aaron will start. And this is not that legible there, but basically, as you move from left to right, at the far left is the Planning Act, the legislation that sets the framework and how we do planning right across the province. Then there's a provincial policy statement, provincial guidelines, then you get into the county's official plan, and then your local official plan, and then zoning, and then you get into the tools, minor variances, site plans, the division of land, all the way over to building permits. And this is sort of certainly how planners think of land use planning. The trick, though, I think, is that most citizens come into it somewhere else. They don't start at the left-hand side and work their all the way through. They often start with Jeff at the building permit. They come in to do something and they find out they can't do it. Or they have an idea for a business and they come in and talk to one of your other staff. And so they get plugged into it at different places. But then we have to sort of step back and make sure that we follow it all the way through so that the provincial rules are followed, county policy, local policy, etc. And then Aaron's going to kind of review each of those in turn.
So it starts off with the Ontario Planning Act. It's the, like Dirk said, it's the provincial legislation that sets out the ground rules for land use planning in Ontario. Municipalities must operate within the rules established by the Planning Act, which details timelines for not only the applicants to follow, but also the administrative staff and the decision makers as well. So we have timelines for public notification, we have timelines for how long a municipality has to make a decision on an application to process it, and that sort of thing. It provides the basis for preparing official plans, zoning bylaws, land division, and also sets out the appeal process under the local planning appeal tribunal, which Dirk will talk about in a little bit. It also ensures the rights of local citizens by establishing notification regulations and ensures that they have a place in our land use planning. The provincial policy statement is just under the Planning Act in that it provides policy direction that actually implements what is set out in the Planning Act. So it outlines things of provincial interest related to land use planning and development, and it's the foundation of the policy-led planning system. So at a local level, decision makers must ensure that the policies in the PPS are applied at a local level. And an important section of the PPS, really for Adelaide Metcalfe, is there's quite a significant section about prime agricultural area. We're a very rural municipality. We have a couple of hamlets and urban areas, but the vast majority are rural lands. So we have to be careful that we're adhering to the policies set out by the province under the PPS. So under the PPS, there's several documents that we find are very helpful with establishing actual land use planning in practice. One of them being the guidelines on permitted uses in Ontario's prime agricultural areas. So the PPS outlines that there's three sort of types of agricultural uses that can be used or that can occur in the prime agricultural area. Those being agricultural-related uses and on-farm diversified uses. So it's a bit tricky to try to figure out where a potential proposal might fit in to ensure that it can actually or should actually be located in the agricultural area. So we refer to this document quite a bit. Another document that we find helpful from the provincial government is the MDS, the Minimum Distance Separation Guidelines, is another document that we must adhere to and really helps us in our everyday planning. So the County of Middlesex official plan, it's quite high level. It doesn't get into too much of the nitty-gritty of the everyday Adelaide Metcalfe policies. So it deals primarily with provincial and county interests, recognizing that the planning powers and authority is still at the local level. So it doesn't, it might make reference to settlement area, but it won't describe the specifics of what is considered a hamlet or a town and that sort of thing. It's really left at the local level to make those policies. Next in our lineup is the Town of Adelaide Metcalfe Official Plan, or Township of Adelaide Metcalfe Official Plan. It's a comprehensive planning document. Again, it's still somewhat high level. It still deals with planning issues in sort of a broad term. However, it does look more specifically towards Adelaide Metcalfe and really what this local citizens have in mind for their communities. Amendments to the plan is a two-step process. So we have the OPA, which is first approved at the local level, and then gets passed up to the county, and the county ensures that it adheres to the county official plan as well as the PPS, and is then approved at a second level. So this is an example of our land use schedule, or one of them anyway. So you can see that the vast majority, the white area, is agricultural land. We have quite a bit of rural. This is one of our more sort of urban areas here. We have the commercial corridor. We have our Second Street sort of residential area to the east. And this basically gives a broader outline for our planning at a whereas the zoning bylaw is more specific on a site-by-site basis. This is much higher. The designation is different than a zoning bylaw. So if you are looking at looking at a rezoning or a zoning amendment, you also have to be in compliance with your designation to the official plan as well. We also have the Adelaide Metcalfe zoning bylaw here, which again deals on a more site-by-site basis. It outlines everything as to what the permitted uses are on the site, setbacks, requirements, types of buildings that are permitted, areas, lot coverage areas and that sort of thing. And those amendments are dealt with at a local level. So here's an example of one of our zoning schedules. It's quite confusing. This is a more urban area, so we do have a more varied amount of zones here. So if a if an applicant comes in and finds that what they want to do somewhat fits in with the intent of their zone, but they don't adhere to one of the provisions, we can do what's called a minor variance, which is dealt with at the Committee of Adjustment. Again, it still follows the intent of what the zoning is looking at, but it doesn't quite match the provision. Other types of zoning amendments include holding symbols, interim control bylaws, and temporary use bylaws. So temporary use would be if you were looking to have a mobile home or a temporary dwelling on your property. If you're going to be rebuilding a new home and you still want to live in the other one until the second one is built, we have temporary bylaws in place for that. Site plan control, a tool used to make sure development applications meet zoning and other standards, usually applied to industrial, commercial, and multi-unit residential development, not agriculture or single residential homes. Includes the design and layout of the buildings and development, including location, landscape, parking, drainage, pedestrian access, all that sort of thing. Once we receive an application, it gets circulated to all of our internal departments as well as several outside agencies, and it's to ensure that what is happening on the site will be efficient and not cause any conflict with neighboring properties and that sort of thing. A development agreement is also prepared and registered against the property, which basically holds them accountable to really adhere to what was submitted and approved. So deviation requires an amendment to the development agreement. Committee of Adjustment also deals with the division of land through severance or consent. It's a municipal authority. The authorized separation of a piece of land to form a new lot or a new parcel of land. A lot of what we do here in Adelaide Metcalfe are the surplus farm building severances, but there are lots of others throughout the province that we don't necessarily deal with here. Rights of way, easements, and any other change to an existing property boundary also requires approval. Subdivision plan of subdivision and plan of condominium is also a county authority. Anything that is submitted at a local level then gets moved up to the county for approval of the draft plan of subdivision or draft plan of condominium. It's more than just the simple consent process. You're actually looking at severing multiple properties or units. And it's a two-step development process, like I said, of draft approval and final approval at the county level. So finally, we get to building permits, which is sort of the last step in the process. If you adhere to your zoning, if you adhere to, or if you don't adhere to your zoning and you apply and are granted a minor variance, you can then apply for your building permit, which is issued through Jeff Denemy, our CEO. Sounds good.
Back up. So the local, I mentioned this earlier, the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. It's an administrative, independent administrative tribunal. And it's basically a renaming of the Ontario Municipal Board, which I'm sure you've probably heard about in the news before. But in essence, almost all decisions that municipalities make related to planning can be appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board or to the LPAT now, either by the applicants or by agencies, conservation authorities occasionally will, that sort of thing. Different levels of government can, and neighbors and whatnot. So we don't have a lot of that in Adelaide Metcalfe, but it certainly does happen. In terms of resources, there is on the left-hand side, citizen guides. There's a number of these that have been published by the province. They're actually out of date right now, and we're sort of waiting to see if they will publish the next version of it. They're excellent. They're sort of 5 or 6 page documents. I don't know if you have hard copy here or not, or they're available on the websites. It just lets a person kind of read through and a great resource to give to someone if they're dealing with something for the first time. And then the right one is a new organization, and it's the Local Planning, okay, my eyes aren't good enough to see that anymore, Support Center, I think it's called now. This is something that was created by the previous provincial government, and it's basically a call or email center that if you have any kind of planning question, you can get in touch with. They have planners, they have lawyers, other administrative staff, and you can talk to them about it and ask questions. We had one of our planners just play dumb and call in and ask some questions about it, and it was pretty general, the information they got, as you can kind of appreciate an office in Toronto trying to answer questions for the entire province. But when you read their material, they do say that they will really even help in LPAC hearings and that sort of thing, so they are a resource out there, so certainly citizens could be directed to talk to that group also. I'll put a couple quick slides in on just the numbers, and this is for 3 years, number of applications for Adelaide Metcalfe. Of course, you can see quite a spike in 2017, and that was with your opening up of the severance policies to allow for the surplus, resident surplus department operation. And I think that's carrying through into 2018. Your number of rezonings are, I think there's only at least 10 of them were related to those previous applications. So we'll know in a couple more years. I can't imagine it will return to 13 a year, but it certainly, it doesn't look like over 40 applications would be a normal year in Adelaide Metcalfe. And then in terms of the files where the county and county council is involved, subdivisions, condominiums, etc., there's really just been the 2 in the last few years, the Grow Gas one and then the commercial, I always forget the name of it, on 2nd Street, there's a condominium for the Prosperity. Oh, thank you. So those 2 both have gone through the system. I'm sorry, jumping in there. Those 2 have both gone through the system and are final approved and registered now, so there is no more sort of active county legal authority files. So I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions or any discussion.
Perfect. Is Council any questions at all? Yeah, Councillor Clark.
As we kind of briefly talked about prior to the meeting, Lambton's challenging the province on lot sizes. Is there any consideration being given at the Middlesex County level to possibly entertain more of a hobby farm situation so that we don't have people requesting a surplus farm dwelling and then having to demolish a perfectly good building just because they want one pony in it? Maybe you can speak to that.
Through the Mayor. So certainly the county's official plan review is long overdue and it is intended to be wrapped up this year. So we are going to do an agricultural issues paper and that will touch on, among other issues, farm size. You're correct that Langton County, as I understand it, are challenging the province's position. Basically, in southwestern Ontario, in the prime agricultural area that Aaron mentioned before, I'm not aware of any official plans in the last number of years that have been approved that would allow for anything less than a 40-hectare property. I believe that Langton are challenging that, and so we'll kind of see how that goes. I haven't talked to them recently to find out exactly what track they're taking on it, but the province's perspective is that sort of original lot size of 100 acres is, there aren't that many farms that are anymore that are even 100 acres, right? Most farm operations are multiple farms, so to split that up even further is sort of counterproductive in their mind. I am aware too, Essex County did quite an interesting study of agricultural property sizes a number of years ago, and again, Essex County is very different than the type of agriculture that happens in Middlesex, but they did in the end conclude that they didn't support division of smaller farm properties because there's a lot of already small farm properties out there, so there is quite a range of existing parcels. So their view, and at least in that study, was that if someone is looking for that smaller opportunity, that they should seek out some of those existing properties. But we have committed to county council to look at that sort of all agricultural issues in this OP review. The only other thing I would add to it is I do think we're in a little bit of a period of flux with the province. Obviously, there's been a change in government at the provincial level. The last government was very involved in land use planning, and the guideline documents that I mentioned, those are much more prescriptive than the previous governments had done. They were very hands-on on land use planning, especially in the Greater Toronto area. This government, there's some indication that they are going to back off some of those things and perhaps relax the rules for municipalities. They've announced a couple of things they're already looking at, of course the Green Belt and the Toronto area stuff, but they've also floated some draft legislation, I don't know what it's called, name escapes me right now. It basically allows you to lift, it's open for business.
Yes,
that's what it's called. It would allow municipality, right now the province, a minister can give what's called a minister zoning order. So when something like Toyota came into place, they can basically lift all land use planning controls. There's a provincial interest in establishing Toyota. They allow for it to be developed, and then they put planning back on top of it. They've got some draft legislation that's out there that would allow a municipality to start that, actually would allow them for a new business employing over 50 people to lift planning controls subject to provincial approval by the minister, and then put planning back in place after the fact. So certainly the signs are that this government may sort of open some of those things back up. So we're not sure how that's going to
industrial.
yeah, it's specific to industrial and for employment, really. It's that idea of I think the press releases are, and there's some, of course, truth to this. A business is looking at locating, and if it takes a year to get through the planning, the species at risk, and the conservation authority, well, they've already moved on to somewhere else. So this would be a faster way to get that business landed.
Any other questions? Sue? Any other questions at all for council? Councilor McKinnon?
Through the mayor to you, Dirk. The ONB, the former ONB, a lot of us have gone before and we have seen some of the decisions coming out of it that didn't make a lot of sense. Are the people sitting on the new tribunal, are they more familiar with zoning and matters than the previous members on the ONB were?
They're the same people.
Oh.
Yeah, it's and I do notice that George is back here, and maybe George will give you other comments on this later too. But basically, I don't want to say it was just a rebranding, but it's very much the same. It did shift the burden of proof a little bit. It puts more emphasis on what council decides, and basically, for many applications now, where in the old days it just council made a decision, and then you'd get to a hearing, and all new information would come out. It would be a brand new review. For most applications now under the legislation, it's supposed to kind of review what council did and decide if council was really off base or not. But it's the exact same people, pretty much the same process. And so far we haven't. We've only had a couple of hearings, and it hasn't been all that different. It has ground to a halt a little bit, just with the new trying to get the new process in place. The timelines are actually longer than it was before, but they're supposed to be shorter.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions at all?
Through the mayor, are these people appointed, or are they professionals, they're in the field, or are they just?
They're
anybody
appointed. They're appointed by cabinet, and they tend to be a mix of everything. Most of them are lawyers. There's the odd planner. Some are retired politicians. It can be a kind of a real gamut. I think one of our struggles is, if you get somebody that's in most OMB hearings, of course, or LPAT hearings are urban. There's just the volume of applications in the GTA. If you have someone with a real urban background that only deals with urban issues, sometimes they struggle to understand, the planning that is in Middlesex. So that can be a bit of a struggle.
Perfect. Okay, I don't think there's any other questions. Thank you very much for the presentation and knowledge that you had there, and look forward to the official planning review for the county and how that's going to affect us at all at the other level and other. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're a little early for our public meetings and committee of adjustments. So we're going to move into the minutes of the previous meetings. So we have the minutes of the January 9th and January 14th, 2019 meetings. We're going to do a motion with both those together. Okay. Councillor McKinnon and Councillor Clark. Is there any errors or omissions for those? All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Moving into the correspondence. The first section there, which is our upcoming conferences, seminars, and meetings. So our next meeting is on February 11th, and then we have our the meetings following that, February 19th and March 4th. And then the budget meetings begin for 2019 on Wednesday, March 6th at 10 a.m. Coming up next week is the Roma Conference from January 27th to 29th, and then the OGRA Conference is February 24th to 27th. And then correspondence item number 1 is from the Township of Warwick, and it's the Conkey Drain Notice of Meeting. Item number 2 is from the Asselva Bayfield Conservation Authority, and it's information session being held on February 5th, and I believe February 7th as well. Councillor McKinnon?
Going back to the Township of Warwick Conkey Drain, should we appoint a member of council to attend that quarter revision?
It's just a review of the engineer's proposal. This is their first step in the process. They haven't got to quarter revision yet. When they go to consider the meeting, then we will have to appoint someone to attend.
Councillor Clark?
I was just curious if Jim goes to that.
Yes.
Yeah, so there is a representative there.
I believe Jim as well as Jeff Little was invited as well. It affects our roads.
Great, thanks.
Okay. And is anyone interested in attending the session from the Asselva Bayfield? Okay, moving into the recommended readings, item number 3 is from MPACT, and it's the 2018 year-end assessment report. And then item number 4 is from the OEB, and it's a notice to consumers of Enbridge Gas Inc. And then lastly, it's the action item, and it's municipality of Métis Belle Côte, I assume. Thank you. Yeah. Thoughts on that one?
I was in favor of filing.
So, sorry, this is the first one we've had with new council members, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so action items. So, reading through it's a resolution, so we'll either file it as just as our the regular correspondence, or if we want to, we can put a motion forward to support that resolution. And then it'd be sent off to the ministries or wherever the outline ones are. So this one would be sent to Ministry. Yes. Do you want to explain any more?
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So the declaration of office is what council is sworn in on. So what they're proposing is due to the times, is to change some of the wording that they have in there. So there, I believe it's paragraph 4. They want to change it. Instead of it saying, "I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Queen," it's going to be changed to, "I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to my country, Canada." So it pertains to all cultures.
Does it not pertain to all cultures now? No.
No, it just says, "I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to my Queen." So to the
it's true founding nations.
I don't think we jumped up and down and put a motion forward to support it. So, with that, I'll ask that we have a motion then that resolves the council receiving and file correspondence items CC1 to CC5.
So moved.
Councilor McKinnon, and seconded by Councilor Brody.
So this is to vote in support of it?
No.
Or to
No, we already put a motion, yeah, so it'll
Okay.
be filed. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. So we'll move into our first staff report, just because we're a little bit ahead of time. Our chief building official, Jeff.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so just the first item is just the permit comparison for the council, just to see the overall building activity within the township, and just provided a comparison of 2017 and 2018, and listed all the different types of construction and buildings. If you review the overall estimated value of construction as well as the total permit fees collected for the years.
Okay, is there any questions at all on the permit comparison sheet? And then just for the gallery's sake, in 2017 we had 92 permits issued, and then in 2018 we had 83.
So through the mayor, I'd like to ask, these special events tents, can you elaborate on that? Is it just very strictly for a wedding? It's not for places within the township that
It's
put events on?
Once the tent exceeds a certain aggregate size in the area, they should have a permit, a building permit. They are required to have a building permit. So whether it be a wedding or anything like that, just any sort of a tent, once it exceeds the aggregate size, then it requires a permit. And we basically, for those, we just issue a permit, don't charge any sort of fee for it.
So it's strictly for the structure then?
The structure.
So
that's
would
correct.
that would be separate than a special event permit that would be for a different reason?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to resolve that council receive the permit comparison summary as presented by the chief building official. Councilor Brody, and seconded by Councilor Clark. All those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried.
And item number 2 is just a proposal from with regards to the Turtle wastewater treatment plant. With regards to sampling, GFM Environmental have they've been contracted to carry the required sampling and provide independent analysis of the results as required by the C of A. Attached is a proposal from GFM with quotes from 3 independent laboratories. In order to minimize the cost of the sampling, the use of the Kerwood plant, the monthly sampling for the effluent monitoring in accordance with Table 2 has been completed by myself with JFM, completing the quarterly sampling of the raw sewage in Table 1 and the groundwater monitoring in Table 3. Sampling under Tables 1, 2, and 3 are mandatory under the C of A. The annual cost of the township can be found on pages 3 and 4 of the attached proposal. A summary of the 3 options for being proposed is on page 4. The proposal is for 2 years. This had to be completed in 2019 and 2020. There's no financial impact. The operating costs are recovered from the user of the system through a flat rate of property taxes. Proposal to recommend to option number 2, which we've done over the years. It's just to retain JFM services as well too, because they were involved in the hydrogeological work when the plant was opened up. So it's a good. I'm just proposing to keep them involved in the process as well, and that way the trigger condition is with the monitoring wells and the nitrate levels. So that way they're involved and if we have any problems, and it's kind of a third party that's looking after that sampling.
Is there any questions at all?
Sorry,
Councillor Clark?
Jeff. So the company that takes the sampling doesn't do the analysis, they're two separate companies,
That's
that's what
correct.
I'm understanding?
That's
Okay,
correct,
thank you.
yes.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments? So the recommendation there, moved by Councillor McKinnon and seconded by Councillor Brody. All those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. Okay, do you have anything else? Jeff?
That's it.
Is there any questions at all for Jeff? No? Perfect. Okay, so we're going to go back into our public meeting. So we need a motion to resolve that the public meeting to hear zoning bylaw amendment application Z01 2019 be opened at 7:05 p.m. Yeah, Councillor Clark and Councillor McKinnon. All those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. Okay, so we have Arvin and Ian. Do you want to come forward to the seat here? And before we begin, what's wrong? Perfect. Before we begin, I just have to state that the purpose of the following public hearing for Adelaide Metcalfe Council is to give the members of council, as well as the general public, an opportunity to hear all interested persons with respect to the application before council this evening. The public is advised that comments expressed and written material presented are a matter of public record available for full disclosure. If a person or a public body files an appeal of the decision made this evening to the local planning appeal tribunal without having made a written submission to council, the tribunal may dismiss the appeal. If you wish to be notified of a decision, please submit a written request to the township and a sign-in sheet will be provided. Right. Yeah, there's no sign-in sheet there, but we'll make sure we get one out there at a certain point. Okay, Aaron.
Thank you, Worship. So the first report in front of council this evening is an application for rezoning, which the purpose and effect of the application is to implement a condition of consent which was imposed by this Committee of Adjustment last year for consent B08-2018. It conditionally severed a parcel of land with an area of 0.4 hectares or 1.03 acres in order to accommodate the disposal of a surplus farm dwelling. The application submitted by Irvin and Ian proposes to amend the zoning of the lot to be severed from the general agriculture zone to the surplus dwelling zone in order to recognize the residential use of the property and to prohibit any further agricultural uses on the land. The application also proposes to amend the zoning of the lot to be retained from general agriculture to agriculture only, to prohibit any new future residential uses in the future. That was written. Future residential uses. So the provincial policy statement, county official plan, and township's official plan generally permit log creation in agricultural areas to dispose of the dwelling surplus to farming operation. Through the consent application, the application was reviewed against the criteria, and it was found to be consistent with the criteria. An implementing bylaw has been drafted for council's approval this evening. As per the Planning Act requirements, the application was circulated to the prescribed agencies. St. Clair Region Conservation Authority did not provide a comment, and the drainage superintendent indicated no concerns with the application. As of the date of this report, no comments or concerns have been received from the public. So it is my recommendation that application for zoning bylaw amendment Z01-2019 be approved, and further that council proceed with the first and second reading of the implementing bylaw, with the final reading to be provided once a deposited reference plan has been received by the township.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Is there anything you'd like to add, Irvin or Ian? No? Perfect. Is there anyone in the gallery wishing to speak to this application? Seeing none. Okay. What we're going to do is we'll have a motion to close the public hearing and then we'll have the motion for approval. So a motion to end the, close the public hearing. So Councillor Clark and Councillor McKinnon, all those in favor, opposed and carried. And then Councillor Clark wanting to move for approval. Okay, and Councillor McKinnon, all those in favor, opposed and carried. There you go. Simple as that.
I just have one question for you, Aaron. What does my surveyor have to do? Does he has to do, like, it's all the survey, but he said he needed to know if the zoning was all approved before he could register it or something?
Why don't I give you a call tomorrow,
Okay,
and I'll tell you exactly
okay,
what needs to be done.
Okay.
You can tell him.
I appreciate that.
No, no problem.
Okay, thank you, Council.
Alright, so we're just a few minutes ahead of time for 7:15 for our community adjustment. So we'll go on to our next staff report, which is from our clerk, Jennifer.
Thanks, Mayor Smith. So this first report, the purpose of this report is to present a new pregnancy and parental leave for members of council policy for council's review and consideration. I presented Bill 68, Modernizing Ontario's Municipal Legislation Act 2017 report in October 2nd, 2017, which provided information regarding a number of amendments made by Bill 68. One of the amendments of Bill 68 dealt with vacancies of the office of a member of council, in particular a council member's ability to take pregnancy and or parental leave without a council motion. This report seeks council's consideration to adopt a policy that outlines the requirements for when a member of council will be absent as a result of a member's pregnancy, the birth of a member's child, or the adoption of a child by the member. So subsection 259 of the Municipal Act states that the office of a member of a council of a municipality becomes vacant if the member is absent from the meetings of council for 3 consecutive months without being authorized to do so by a resolution of council. And the amendments to the Municipal Act added a new subsection 259, subsection 1.1, which states Clause 1C does not apply to vacate the office of a member of council of a municipality who is absent for 20 consecutive weeks or less if the absence is a result of the member's pregnancy, the birth of the member's child, or the adoption of a child by the member. Clause 1C does not apply to vacate the office of a member of a council of a municipality who is absent for 20 consecutive weeks or less if the absence is a result of the member's pregnancy, the birth of the member's child, or the adoption of a child by the member. Prior to the above amendment, if a member of council was pregnant, gave birth to a child, or adopted a child, then the member was required to seek and receive a resolution of council for an extended leave of absence, as would be required for an extended absence for any reason. Subsection 259 1.1 provides an exemption to subsection 259 subsection 1 provision, meaning that no motion is required to grant leave for a member for 20 consecutive weeks or less if the absence is a result of the member's pregnancy, the birth of the member's child, or the adoption of a child by the member. And attached to that is the draft pregnancy and parental leave for members of council policy for council's review or consideration. Financial impact, there is none known at this time. And my recommendation is for council to receive and approve the pregnancy and or parental leave for members of council policy as presented to be compliant with Bill 68.
Any discussion? Councilor Clark?
Through the mayor, Jennifer, does that give us the right to fill that vacancy as now on a temporary basis, or no, because the person may only miss 2 meetings or 1 meeting or 10
Right,
meetings?
so what will happen is through this policy, if there's a member of council that falls under having given birth or adoption, that seat can remain vacant and it won't be fulfilled till the member comes back.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, is there any other questions? Okay, motion for approval. Councilor Clark and Councilor Brody. All those in favor? Opposed? Not carried. We're going to jump back into the, yeah. Because the next one's going to take longer than a minute. Okay, so we have a motion to resolve the council convene as the committee of adjustment for the purpose of hearing minor variance application A01-2019 and B01-2019 and B02-2019 as well as B03-2019 at 7:15. Councilor McKinnon and Councilor Clark, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. overview again. The purpose of the following public hearings for the Adelaide Metcalfe Committee of Adjustment are to give the members of the Committee of Adjustment, as well as the general public, an opportunity to hear all interested persons with respect to the applications before the committee this evening. The public is advised that comments expressed in written material presented are a matter of public record available for full disclosure. If a person or public body files an appeal of decision made this evening to the local planning appeal tribunal without having made a written submission to the committee, the tribunal may dismiss the appeal. If you wish to be notified of the decision, please submit a written request to the township and a sign-in sheet will be provided. So, our first one is for our BO1 2018 for 28453 Kerwood Road, and I believe we have Jonathan Burnett. Sorry. Welcome. I'm assuming you received a report from Aaron for the application?
I did, yeah.
Perfect.
Do you want my
No, so Aaron, you'll go ahead.
So it's a little bit different. We have two applications in one report going before council this evening, or sorry, committee this evening. Applications for consent B01-2019 and for minor variance A01-2019. Owners are Alphonse and Marlies Bless, agent John Arnott. The purpose of application for consent B01-2019 is to sever a farm parcel of approximately 39.05 hectares of land from an existing farm parcel of 78.13 hectares. The purpose of this is to just facilitate the separation of the two properties. And in line with this, we have also submitted an application for minor variance, which will provide relief from section 6.2 of the zoning bylaw, which stipulates that no property, or the minimum property area for agricultural lands are to be 40 hectares. The subject property is located at the southwest corner of Kerwood Road and Mulberry Drive. The proposed lands to be severed are currently vacant and currently in agricultural production, vacant from structures or buildings. And a portion of the lands identified as significant woodlands. The proposed lands to be retained contain a single detached dwelling, 5 turkey barns, and 4 sheds. The dwelling is privately serviced with an individual septic system and well. So it was just something that we've dealt with in the last few days. I have a minor amendment to my report, and I believe you have another recommendation list of conditions. So there's one small variation. It's just contemplated that actually a well that facilitates, a well that services these lands to be retained is actually located on the lands to be severed. So we're looking at an additional easement for well access with this application. Surrounding land uses are common with agriculture. So the size of both of the lands proposed to be severed and the lands proposed to be retained appear to meet the criteria of the permanent policy statement, the county official plan, and the local official plan. Planning staff are satisfied that the size and configuration of the proposed lots will not negatively impact the ability to farm lands, and the flexibility to adapt to future farming practices will not be compromised. So in addition to the consent application, we have reviewed the application for minor variance based on the 4 tests prescribed by the Planning Act. The first test being, is the variance considered minor in nature? The application seeks to recognize the areas of 0.95 hectares deficiency and a 1.22 hectare deficiency. These lot areas will have no impact on the capacity of the land for agricultural purposes. Therefore, staff are of the opinion that it is actually minor in nature. It is an appropriate use of the lands. There's no proposed change from the agricultural use. Does the variance maintain the intent of the official plan? The variance has no impact, again, on the capacity of the land for agricultural purposes. Therefore, the intent of the OP is maintained. And finally, does the variance maintain the intent of the zoning bylaw? The minimum lot provision in the agricultural zone is to ensure that new parcels of land are of a sufficient size for efficient agricultural uses. And again, we don't anticipate any impact on the capacity of the land for these uses. So it's the opinion of the staff that the application meets the intent or the 4 tests of the Planning Act. So the application was circulated as per the Planning Act requirements. There were no concerns or comments given, either from agencies or from the public. So it is, I have my revised conditions here. So it is planning staff's recommendation that application for consent E01-2019 be granted, subject to the following conditions. Condition 1, that a certificate of consent should be given within 1 year of the date of the notice of decision. Number 2, that the applicant solicitor submits an undertaking in a form satisfactory of the Committee of Adjustment to register an electronic transfer of title. Number 3, that the application for minor variance A01-2019 be approved and in full force. Number 4, that a preliminary survey showing the lands to be severed be submitted to the township prior to registration at the Land Registry Office. Number 5, that 2 paper copies and 1 digital copy of this plan be submitted to the township. Number 6, that the applicant establish a permanent easement over the lands to be severed in favor of the lands to be retained to access the existing private water well. Number 7, any outstanding property taxes be paid. Number 8, the drainage assessment schedule be revised if required. And number 9, that independent accesses of the lands to be severed and the lands to be retained are provided to the satisfaction of the township. Further that, application for minor variance A01-2019 be granted.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Is there anything you'd like to add, Jonathan?
I think Aaron did an excellent job summarizing the works. I just want to apologize to the oversight in the water well, so she was scrambled last minute, but she did a great job. Thanks for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the gallery wishing to speak to this application? Seeing none. Is there any questions or comments from the Committee of Adjustment? So the recommendation in front of us, so the first one, which would be the application for the consent, moved by Councillor McKinnon and seconded by Councillor Clark, and that's for approval with the 9 conditions. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed and carried. And then the motion for the minor variance, which is A01-2019. Councillor McKinnon and Councillor Brody. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Okay, thank you. Okay, next up we have the Dorman Bros Group Inc. at 29025 Central Road. We have John Murray here. Okay, Aaron, if you'd like to go through the report.
The next report for committee's consideration this evening is application for consent B02-2019. The municipal address is 29025 Center Road, and the owners are Dorman Brothers Group Incorporated. The purpose of this application is to permit the severance of a residence from a farm parcel, facilitating the creation of a new lot to dispose of a surplus farm dwelling severance. The subject property is approximately 10.22 hectares in size and is located at the southwest corner of the intersection of Egremont Drive and Central Road. The lands proposed to be severed contain an existing single detached dwelling and 2 accessory buildings. The dwelling is privately serviced with an individual septic system and well. The lands proposed to be retained are largely in agricultural production. However, the applicants have indicated that they intend to develop a portion of the property for commercial use to be considered under a separate application than this evening. Surrounding land uses are predominantly agriculture. The PPS, County Official Plan, and Township Official Plan generally permit lot creation in agricultural areas to dispose of a dwelling surplus to a farming operation as a result of farm consolidation. Planning staff is satisfied that farm consolidation has in fact occurred. The applicant has requested that existing accessory buildings be maintained on the lands proposed to be severed, and the township's chief building official requires that the buildings be inspected by a qualified professional to confirm structural soundness and determine if the buildings meet minimum standards for a residential accessory building. There were no MDS implications in this application, and planning staff advised that if the consent application this evening is approved, that the lands to be retained will require an appropriate zone change, as well as the lands to be severed. Planning staff are satisfied that the criteria for surplus farm dwelling severances have been met or can be appropriately addressed via conditions of consent. So the provincial policy statement directs that lot creation may be permitted for a resident surplus to a farming operation, provided the new lot is limited in size. Planning staff actually have evaluated the property and recommend that a reduced lot frontage and lot depth be approved. It is my opinion that the reduced lot area would be more consistent with the policies or the intent of the policy direction with respect to keeping the parcel to the minimum size required for the residential dwelling and the on-site services. The application was circulated as per the Planning Act. Township's chief building official has several requirements, one of which is proof of adequate and potable water supply. Number 2 is that the septic system is to be inspected to ensure that it meets some minimum standards. Number 3, that the existing accessory buildings to be retained on the residential lot will require a report from a qualified individual to confirm structural soundness. And finally, that the dwelling appears to be habitable from the outside is to be confirmed for as one of the conditions. The county engineer also advised that the owners will be required to dedicate land up to 18 meters from the center line of Egremont Drive and from County Road 81 being Center Road if they are not already to that width. So my recommendation for this application is to grant the application subject to the conditions that I've listed in the on the planning evaluation report, as well as I have added in an additional condition related to the recommended decrease in size for the lot to be severed. For the benefit of the actual public meeting, I will read the conditions. I'll do my best to go through them as quick as possible here for your sake of hearing. Number 1, that the certificate of consent be issued within 1 year of the date of notice of decision. Number 2, that the applicant solicitor submits an undertaking to register an electronic transfer of title. Number 3, that any outstanding property taxes be paid. Number 4, that the applicant revise the area of the lot to be severed to be approximately 0.72 hectares with a frontage of approximately 63 meters and a lot depth of approximately 115 meters. Number 5, that a preliminary survey be submitted to the township prior to registration at the land registry office for approval. Number 6, that 2 paper copies and 1 digital copy be submitted. Number 7, that if required, the owner provide road widening dedications to the County of Middlesex. Number 8, that a zoning bylaw amendment which recognizes the residential use and prohibits new dwellings on the retained lands be in full force and effect. Number 9, that the existing accessory buildings be inspected by a qualified professional and the inspection report be provided to the township. Number 10, that unless replaced, the existing septic system is to be inspected with a report coming to the township as well. Number 11, that the habitability of the single detached dwelling be confirmed. Number 12, that a drain assessment schedule be revised in accordance with the Drainage Act. Number 13, independent accesses are to be provided to land to be severed as well as land to be retained. And number 14, that the owner enter into a severance agreement with the township to advise future owners of the normal farm practices occurring in the area.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Sean or Rita, would you like to speak to the application at all?
The only thing that just seems a shame on that property to kill the trees just to make the lot smaller.
That's my, you look at this picture here, and how are you going to cut it back to? I mean, it's the perfect. To me, that's a perfect severance, right? I mean, what's the difference if it's 0.72 or 1 point? I mean, really.
So my question through the mayor is, this diagram that you've drawn, is this what you're proposing, or this was the application?
That was actually the map that was provided through the notice to the residents. So that's included, or that shows exactly what was applied for through the application. Okay. It was through the schedules that were attached to my report, there's a third key map that shows my recommendation for the reduced size.
So,
So it's not in agricultural production right now?
No.
Councillor Clark, with you on the agenda there, so map 2 is what was proposed, and map 3 is what Aaron, our planner, is proposing. Yeah, Councillor McKinnon?
Through the mayor to the Dortmunds. I think that as Councillor Brody stated, it looks like a good severance, and the trees actually make a good boundary between the agriculture and the residential. So I wouldn't be opposed to going with what you had applied for.
That would be appreciated. I just think it's a shame to knock down a bunch of trees just to gain half an acre.
Well, and the thing, it's not in production right now,
No.
and I think each application has to be looked at with some common sense, and I would concur with the other two that I don't see a reason to reduce that. That an exception should be made.
The Ministry of Transportation wants a little bit of land to make sure that we can make that corner bigger someday, so. Scratch my back, I scratch yours.
Okay, is there anything else you want to?
I'm just looking for the blessing from the council in the future. I will be coming to knocking on your door sometime in regards to putting relocating my business here. So there's no, there's no surprises whenever I come asking for the next narrative. I find the first step is to come and get a farm. I would like to sever that house. First of all, but second of all, I am going to be knocking on your door to ask for permission to go to the next step to develop that to put my business there in the future. And I'm hoping that I've got the support.
Sorry, through the mayor, so you want to move your business here, or you want it on the remaining agriculture? You're going to come in later and ask for commercials on it?
Remaining
On a portion of the remaining.
Oh, on a portion,
Yeah.
okay.
on a small portion of the remaining property.
Yeah, well, it's a good access point there.
So there's no restrictions on if this sentence goes through letting a future building go on this property, right? Like I know what you're, which
It's not a residence, so.
right.
Yeah,
So this is a
I just wouldn't want to
two-step
restrict.
Yeah.
that's right. It's not a dwelling. I understand.
So-
we're not allowed to put a dwelling on there, but a dwelling is somewhere where you're going to live.
Right.
Yeah, and planning staff obviously hasn't done a report on this because we're only looking at just the severance for the surplus farm dwelling.
So through the mayor, Aaron, so there would be no restrictions on, basically it's a two-step process, so they're doing this to sever it off, and the only way to do that is under the current, with its own agricultural, and then after that, they would go in and ask for it to be changed to commercial.
So I left it a little bit open-ended in
Okay.
terms of how I worded things. I
Okay.
said that it be appropriately rezoned rather than stipulating it had to be agriculture only.
Perfect, okay.
Councillor McKinnon?
I'll move that we approve the application as filed.
I'll
So-
second that.
So with the 14 conditions
With the-
minus
yes.
the number 4, so 13 conditions altogether.
Yes.
Mhm.
That's moved by Councillor McKinnon and seconded by Councillor Clark. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll excuse myself from the next application, having declared my interest earlier.
Okay, next we have consent application BO3 2019, which is Donald and Catherine Denning for parts lot 16 and concession 4. We have Don and George Sinker here.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. All right, I'm assuming you have the report from our planner?
Yes.
Okay, Aaron, would you like to go through the report?
So our final report going to committee this evening is application for consent B03-2019, owned by Donald and Catherine Denning, and obviously George Sinker is here as a representative as well. So the purpose of this application is to sever a lot from a 0.6 hectare or 1.55 acre vacant property within the hamlet of Cairngorm.
Good job.
A tough one. In order to create essentially 2 residential building lots. So I've included a little chart in my report as well. It's maybe a little confusing. There's one lot right now. They're looking to sever it into 2. So I sort of indicated one would be considered lot 1 and one would be lot 2. The lot proposed to be severed and the lands proposed to be retained are both in agricultural production. And the surrounding land uses are comprised of a mix of hamlet residential to the south, being the majority of Cairngorm, and agricultural uses to the north, east, and west. So this property is a little bit different. I know it looks quite rural and quite agricultural, but if you actually look at the schedule in the official plan, it's actually designated within the hamlet boundary. So that's why we're sort of looking at it as more of just a residential property that's being severed into 2. The provincial policy statement, county official plan, and township official plan direct that settlement areas are to be the focus of growth and development. And planning staff are satisfied that the proposal to create 1 additional building lot to be privately serviced is considered infill development within the hamlet boundary. Planning staff note that the applicant provided preliminary servicing details and possible building envelopes as part of the submission package. Engineering, site servicing, and grading plans for the lot to be severed and the lot to be retained will be required and have been added as conditions to the consent. The proposed use of the lots to be severed and retained, being residential, is compatible with existing neighborhood uses. Neighboring land uses, not neighborhood uses. The applicant will be required to demonstrate that water supply, sanitary, sewage disposal, and drainage are adequate for the satisfaction of the township. Again, by providing engineering, site servicing, and grading plans. Planning staff advise that if the consent application is granted, that both of the lots be rezoned to hamlet residential to recognize the residential use and prohibit any future agricultural uses. The proposed lots meet the minimum zoning requirements for this hamlet residential zone and are therefore an appropriate zone for the subject lands. In summary, planning staff are satisfied that the criteria for the creation of 2 residential building lots have been met or can be appropriately addressed by conditions of approval. The application was circulated. We received a few comments, one from the chief building official, again that the engineering, site servicing, and grading plans be submitted, and that proof of adequate and potable water supply for both the severed and the retained individually be proof of the supply, The county engineer indicated that the owner will be required to dedicate lands up to 15 meters from the center line of Calvert Drive and 18 meters from Melbourne Road for the purposes of road widening in the future. The owners are also required to provide a 0.3 meter reserve along Melbourne Road. This is to prevent access onto Melbourne Road. He essentially wants to funnel all of the traffic onto the sites off of Calvert Drive rather than off of Melbourne. And he also indicated that driveway access are to be located as far west as possible to maintain suitable distance from the intersection. So my recommendation on the application is for it to be granted, subject to the following conditions. Here we go again. That certificate of consent be given within 1 year of the notice of decision date. Number 2, that the applicant solicitor submits an undertaking to register electronic transfer of title. Number 3, that the owner provide road widening dedications to the County of Middlesex, if required. Number 4, that the owner provide a 0.3 meter reserve land dedication to the County of Middlesex along the frontage of the lands adjacent to Melbourne Road. Number 5, that a preliminary survey be submitted to the township for review prior to submission to the Land Registry Office. Number 6, that 2 paper copies and 1 digital copy of this plan be submitted. Number 7, that a zoning bylaw amendment to recognize the residential uses of these properties be in full force and effect. Number 8, that independent accesses to the severed and retained lots be provided. Number 9, that the engineered site servicing and grading plans be submitted to the satisfaction of the township. And number 10, that any outstanding property taxes be paid in full.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. George, would you like to add anything to the application?
Yeah, I think that Aaron summarized it very well. The distinction and reason that this application is valid is due to the settlement area extending north of Calvert Drive. And so that was the whole basis for the application. And before we even brought the application, we checked with Lasky's well drilling to make sure that there was water available. And we also had Art Boss do some of the technical matters related to sewage system design so that we knew before we filed that it could all be achieved if the consent was granted. So we'll follow up if the consents are granted. We'll follow up with the zoning and the conditions there in that way.
Perfect. Okay. Is there any questions at all from the Committee of Adjustment? Councilor Clark?
So I haven't freshened my knowledge on the official plan, but I'm just wondering, and the only reason I ask this is because if you're having road access from Calvert, is this land all agriculture, or is there potential also for hamlet development on those lands as well?
Actually, no, it's just that one specific property that has the hamlet designation.
Okay.
So that will be the extent of development sort of across the Calvert Drive.
Oh, okay, because my question was if there was going to be future development, maybe it would go somewhere else, but no. Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Okay. Any questions at all, Councilor Brody? Okay. With that, go ahead.
If I may, Aaron, there isn't a condition that relates specifically to the well or the water supply. Should there be a condition added that directly relates to that? As I'm reading through it, so it refers to the engineered site servicing and grading plan, but there's not a condition specific in your recommendation to the provision of well on each lot prior to condition. That's just the, it doesn't specifically say that there is a well to the property, and if they find there's no water on one of the lots, then how do we deal with that without having to come back for consent?
Sorry, doesn't Section 5 cover that? Under the preliminary survey?
That's what I assumed, but maybe.
Yeah, if there's wells there already, but if there is no wells there, we want to ensure that each lot has its own
There won't
property.
be well there now.
Yeah, I think
There's no well there now.
Years and years ago, the deep question was, Alaska has submitted the form that says there's no problem with water there.
I mean, the issue would be that we wouldn't be able to deal with the lots if there's no water source.
Yeah, but we're creating lots of those wells being in existence, so.
Would you like to add the proof of potable water supply? Or is there something more specific that you
We made it a condition on all our other consents when we're creating a residential lot that they provide proof that there is a water supply there, so without having anything in writing to us.
Well, we do have
that.
I mean, we do have something in writing that from Mr. Lasky that was that we filed with the township's our opinion that we'll be able to find a good water source on the above mentioned property by ministry records. There are several good wells in the area. So I think it would be a hardship to impose on the Dennings to require them to drill wells because how do we know where we want the wells in relation to where the house is going to be?
Because are you then not going to run into the problem for your septic? I'm assuming on a parcel that big, you're going to want to raise bed or something like that. So the conservation, are they going to weigh in on that? Or have you got your boss?
Well, yeah, I think it's the boss has designed it all as to where everything should go. So certainly we're not going to be able to sell the lots if we can't provide if there isn't a valid water supply. But I don't think it should be a condition that the well should be installed before the consent is endorsed.
I would just say the proof that there is some sort of potable water on site for each lot. Otherwise, we get back into a consent on a consent because we would need an easement somehow because we can't get water there. So.
Well, I think that's what the letter from the well driller, he says by ministry records there are several good wells in the area. So.
Right, yeah, that's what we're just requesting proof that there's potable water within that area. So we're not creating a lot without any viable options, or we wouldn't have, we don't have water lines in that area to provide them to the lots. We don't want to create lots that we can't provide services to through the municipality.
I guess at this point, it's not on the list right now. Committee of Adjustment will have to decide if we want to put that on.
This is probably a unique one. We had an application like
I think the letter sums it up. I guess, from the qualified well driller. That's what I was looking at, just something from one of my comment there, was just something from a qualified well driller that there would be, no problem finding adequate source of potable water on site. So
I don't think
he says that, I
don't think
I don't know how
we wouldn't
pass
file these
these comments.
applications and gone to this expense if we weren't fairly certain that it was going to be available.
Can we put that in the condition that in case there is an issue? Like, I don't know how, like, when they go to develop, what I guess we're trying to do is maybe if they go to develop and there is an issue, is that kind of what cat word?
If there ends up that there is no water on either one of those lots, what happens then? Because we create lots that aren't serviced.
Well, that's not something the town
first, but we just want.
Yeah, that's not something the township's guaranteeing. They're basically saying that. So as long as we have something in there that says that we're not liable on if they don't find water. I mean,
Well, in my experience,
they're
it's
going through
just
the expense
because
of doing the severance, right? So if all of a sudden they can't find water, you can't sell. Correct?
Well, my experience is you just have how determined are you to find water? Do you want to go down 100 feet or 150 feet? So you just write a check, right?
Well, there's some areas that are a lot harder than that.
This is not,
No, but
basically
there's already
within
water, yeah.
100 yards of there, whatever the allowances are, there was the co-op assembly yard there with the cattle barns and all that. And they've done 100 and, actually there's been over 300 cattle with water for the weekend, and there's lots of water.
Yeah.
That is
And the whole subdivision.
And they're dug wells, they're not deep wells.
We did the subdivision across the road, which is probably how this ended up
Exactly.
being settlement area, and they're all serviced by individual wells.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like Jeff, Dennis, all in that area, all got
Oh,
no
good
water
wells,
problems
yeah.
whatsoever. No.
From just my 2 cents, I don't see an issue of not putting that in. There's already a lot there. All we're doing is creating a second lot.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if they weren't coming, if the application wasn't coming before us, there could have been a building permit for that lot anyways with one house and they'd have to find a well anyways. We're just looking at that area as well. I think there's probably 20 houses just south of there and they all seem to have water. So
Actually,
I
more than that.
yeah, I don't know. I just not sure. But yeah, I think we should be okay.
Well,
I understand
agree.
staff's concern, but at the same time, yeah.
Well, and then to your point, you could be putting a house up there right now and not having to prove you have water, so.
Exactly.
Mm.
And to that point, the reason for going through this, and maybe it doesn't make any difference, is the size of a lot to put one house on. And we've all seen it, that people get them, but then they're too big a lot to look after. And then all of a sudden, my brother living here, my nephew living there, and you got a junk pile in the corner. We've all seen it. That's the reason that we're going through that for a while. So.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on this application? So we have the recommendation here for approval with the 10 conditions. Councillor Clark and Councillor Brody. All those in favor?
You gotta vote too, don't you?
Yeah. All those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. Well, I do, but it might be a lot for me to move or second it, but.
There's the taxes there. It's not that dropping off, so they're involved. Thanks for your consideration.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I didn't know if you were, Don, I didn't know if you were heading for a whole subdivision eventually. I didn't know.
No, just clean up loose ends, all it is. It's into that age and
Yeah,
where we're
I
at,
know,
all
I
these
know.
ends gotta get cleaned up sooner or later, so it's
Yeah.
fine.
No problem.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. We just need a motion then to resolve that the Committee of Adjustment be closed at 7:49 p.m. and Council reconvene in regular session. Councillor McKinnon and Councillor Brody. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Alright, so going back to our staff reports, and we'll continue on with our clerk's report. And the next one is the Property Standards Committee.
Thanks, Mayor Smith. So this report is based off of conversations that have taken place at the last special meeting that we had January 9th. There was discussion of what a property standards committee is, and this is basically to start the ball rolling with getting a committee put in place should we start receiving complaints, should the bylaw enforcement officer start investigating, should there be appeals. So it's just to have this in place. The Township of Adelaide Metcalfe has set out standards to ensure property owners maintain their properties within the community. And the property standards bylaw regulates items of safety and general upkeep of properties and buildings. If the property does not conform to the bylaw and upon receiving a complaint, a bylaw enforcement officer investigates and determines if the property standards bylaw has been violated. If so, a property standards order is issued to the owner. Orders are issued for violations of certain Ontario Building Code and municipal bylaw standards for residential, multi-residential, agricultural, and commercial properties. The Property Standards Committee is a quasi-judicial body appointed by council to consider appeals to orders issued by the bylaw enforcement officers. It is the committee's role to make an informal and impartial decision. The committee has the following powers under the Ontario Building Code Act, so they can confirm the order or orders served by the township, they can quash the order, amend the order, or extend the deadline for compliance. Examples of property not complying with property standards bylaw include properties laden with debris, unsightly vegetation, conditions that constitute a health, fire, or accident hazard. The committee will be familiar with general rules of procedure before administrative tribunals, admissibility of evidence, and the relevant provisions under the Ontario Building Code Act. The process summary: if an owner disagrees with the order or a portion of the order, they may appeal to the Property Standards Committee. The committee conducts a public hearing to address the appeal, makes decisions to confirm, modify, and rescind the order, to demolish or repair, and to extend time for complying with the order if, in the committee's opinion, the general intent and purpose of the bylaw are maintained. The composition of the Property Standards Committee is 5 council members, and you guys will be appointed for the duration of term of council. The frequency of meetings are as required, and the financial impact, currently remuneration for the Property Standards Committee, is included in the remuneration for council. So my recommendation is to appoint a Property Standards Committee, that being Curtis Smith, Marianne Hendricks, Mike Brody, Sue Clark, Betty Ann McKinnon as voting members. And the non-voting members to the Property Standards Committee would be myself as secretary, the CAO Treasurer Kathy Case as Deputy Secretary in my absence, and the Chief Building Official / Bylaw Enforcement Officer Jeff Denemy.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes.
Is there any questions at all for the report or the recommendation? Oh, Councillor Clark?
I just have some comments. 2 things. Given that based on examples of properties not complying, one of the third item being conditions that constitute a health, fire, or accident hazard, to that point I would suggest possibly that we include Aaron, the fire chief, as a non-voting member. That's my first comment. And the second one is, I appreciate that we've got all the council members on there, but as I've indicated in the past, I think it might be of benefit to have a community member on there. Those are my only comments.
Are there questions or comments from council? Councillor McKinnon?
I agree with Councillor Clark that it likely would be good to have a non-council member sit as well. So I would be in favor of that.
That would be hard to get, I think.
Get
or
some.
who do you get? Or who do you?
I was going to recommend your father-in-law.
He would say no to that one. I'll tell you that right now. Who wants to go up there and ruffle too many feathers sometimes?
Well, I guess we could put that out there, and if we have no takers, then they've been given that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And give them a timeline to respond and post it on the website. And if we don't hear from anybody in 60 days or so, then it would just default to the council. But I still say, from a fire standpoint, because there is one property in the township right now that as a result of fire is a mess on the street, and I know we've not had a written complaint presented, but perhaps the fire chief could give valuable input into that, and maybe other buildings in the municipality that are not safe.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, the fire chief has different mechanisms to go through under the Fire Code Act and Fire Protection and Safety that he would be able to address issues. This is specifically in regards to the bylaw that we have in place. So the bylaw enforcement officer is the only person that would be able to lay charges under the Bylaw Standards Act. So that's why the fire chief is not included as a member. He would likely be consulted if there was any concerns, but he has authorities under specific legislation where he can take action without having to go through property standards. So to rely on that, the issues that are coming through under property standards bylaws are different than what would be under the fire regulations.
So then, to your point, do all non-voting members, yourself included as well as Jennifer, have the same powers as Jeff?
Jeff is the only one, the CBO appointed as our bylaw enforcement officer would be the only one that would be able to lay an order on a property.
Right, so Aaron would not be able to lay an order either?
No, because he's not designated our bylaw enforcement officer, and that comes back to the wording of our current bylaw. So we're only dealing with the bylaw as it stands today. Any changes or any recommendations can come forward when we revise the bylaw, which is one of the targets identified in our strategic plan review, was to get those bylaws up to date and in place. So the composition of your committee could change at that point in time. Right now, we're just dealing with what we have in place. So if you wanted to change it, that would be the time to change it, would be when you've got your new committee in. You have a new bylaw, which will be up to date and more current.
But you're asking for the committee and the bylaw to be passed tonight?
No.
No, the bylaw is already in place. The 2002 bylaw is already in existence.
So you're just asking for the committee then?
It's only to recognize that if we do have a complaint come in today, we have not appointed our property standards committee. So if a complaint came in tomorrow and Jeff was out and did an inspection and took action, then we need to have the appeal process in place because they are entitled to have an appeal to the Committee of Adjustment under the 2002 bylaw.
Okay, so then to follow up on your point, we could approve this tonight, so we have a standing committee if a complaint comes in tomorrow. Hypothetically, we could place an ad on our website to solicit anyone in the community that would be interested in this. If we get no takers after 60 days, or it's not someone that we feel will add value to the committee from a skill set, I suppose, perspective, then we could action that later. Is that what you're suggesting?
So what we're recommending is we just appoint a committee for now in case we do have a complaint, and then once you have your new bylaw in place and what you want to do with your committee, then I would recommend you go out so they have a chance to review what they're going to actually be evaluating. Right now we're working off an old bylaw which only the bylaw enforcement officer has authority under. So if we are going to revise it and to change the whole process, which includes the complaint forms, the whole how we deal with it, because right now our bylaw doesn't even give us any direction after the order is issued, other than they are allowed to appeal. So what we would do is look at it at that point in time, and you would have to appoint your members from council, because most committees you want an odd number of people sitting on it so a decision can be made without having to have a tie vote at any point in time. So if we appointed just one person from the public, would it be 5 councillors and 1 person from the public making that decision? And then it comes back to, once you find out what your process is going to be and what your requirements are, as a member of public, would want to spend township resources and township money to tear down houses and invest that kind of, make those decisions without having any stake at the council table? So that's a question that needs to come back to council for review and how you want to deal with those processes.
So through the mayor, I'd like to ask, so am I misunderstanding, or is it clear that we would never, that this committee, what are we calling ourselves here? Property Standards Committee, it's a reactionary committee, so it only meets if we have an issue, therefore we would never meet?
Correct.
We're not going to meet, so then we wouldn't get a chance to visit what I'm suggesting.
Correct. Under this, what we're suggesting tonight and what we're recommending, we're not reactionary to orders that are issued as of.
Right, but so we will never have a meeting unless we're reacting to something, so we will never have the opportunity to adjust any of the content in what's being presented.
So I think, okay, so the recommendation here is just to make sure we have a committee for the bylaw we have in place. I think what Kathy's saying is that we need to, Jennifer's revising the bylaw, or looking at the bylaw to have it revised to come to council. And I think, Kathy, you're still recommending that it would be the 5 members in council for that new bylaw, and what you're saying is you're not sure it's a good idea to have a member of the public on that committee, 1 or 2 or whatever it would be. That's
correct, and that's a decision that you would make once you see the new bylaw and what the process is in what you want appealable through your bylaw.
and
Okay, so there will be another. There will be another discussion at some point receiving the amended bylaws or the beefed up ones.
Oh, absolutely.
Or whatever. Okay,
yes,
that's all.
yes.
I just want another chance.
Yeah. These bylaws
To
are being
speak to
recommended for total review,
Okay,
which would
perfect.
include your committee structure, your appeal process, what forms you wanted to see completed, all of that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Councillor Clark, are you also, you're saying more of like the whole reactionary thing, are you wanting to see that the committee meet on a regular basis, quarterly or something, and wanting to have it so that it's more of a discussion of, is there a property that's in need kind of thing? Is that what you're,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So would that be something we can have in the bylaw then, Kathy, the new one, or is that something where we should have lay out a whole new committee if council would like to see that?
Yes, that would be something I would recommend if you wanted to have that approach. If you're going to do it on non-complaint basis, like on a public input basis, then you would have to develop that through your policy.
The bylaw. Okay.
Yes, through the policy, through the bylaw.
Okay.
Is there any other questions at all on the report and the recommendation?
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, moved by Councillor McKinnon and seconded by Councillor Brody. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed?
No, I'm in
Okay.
favor. Sorry.
All in favor? Yeah.
No,
Opposed?
you'll hear
Carried.
from me again.
Okay.
Later on when the bylaw comes back in a few meetings.
I assume so.
Okay. Sorry about that. I always
I'm
ask
good with
too
that.
many questions.
Oh, we have a few more from Jennifer.
Where are we on here?
We're on
Livestock?
Yeah, livestock.
Okay.
So at the last council meeting, I brought a report to appoint on municipal investigator under the Ontario Wildlife Damage Compensation Program / livestock valuer, and in discussions with taking in applicants for fence viewers, one of the interested applicants for fence viewer, I had asked him if he would be interested as an alternate to be a municipal investigator under the OWDCP livestock valuer. We currently only have the one, but I feel that it would be a good idea to have alternates or backup in the event that we get a call for municipal investigator and our one and only investigator that's appointed isn't available. When you are dealing with livestock claims, they are time sensitive, and if you don't have a valuer at hand, it can hinder the results of whether that farmer will get any compensation back through the province. So my recommendation is that we appoint Mr. Jim Raddick as our alternate for municipal investigator under the OWDCP livestock valuer. And that would be effective immediately, and that the necessary bylaw be approved by council.
Okay, any discussion? Councillor McKinnon?
Through you, Mayor, to Jennifer, are there courses that Mr. Reddick can take to bring him up to date on what's expected of the livestock valuer?
Not that I'm aware of. He does have experience with valuing livestock, including sheep and fowl, so he's already kind of in that field. And again, it'd be all dependent on any livestock claims that come across the counter when they come in.
Thank you.
If I may add, Mr. Mayor, we just received word that the OWDCP is changing the current format effective February the 1st. So we would ensure that they are brought on and that they're provided with whatever training opportunities come through the ministries. We do have the new forms here at the office now, and we'll make sure that they're provided with those.
Thank you.
I still move we
Okay.
accept that.
Councillor Clark and Councillor McKinnon for approval. All those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried.
My next report is, actually the next two reports are policies that are for council to review. These policies will also be given to employees for their input prior to coming back to council for approval. So the first one I'll talk about is the workplace drug and alcohol policy, and it's needing review. We have one, but can't seem to locate where it was approved by council at any point. And of course, my report's not loading, so. Basically what it is an update to include cannabis, since cannabis was legalized in October to come into effect. So this is to include drugs and alcohol. Thank you. The legalization of recreational cannabis on October 17, 2018 provided an opportunity to implement a workplace drug and alcohol policy for the township. The draft policy includes definitions, including one for safety-sensitive positions. Specific provisions are included in the policy where penalties may be more severe when an employee who may be impaired is in a safety-sensitive position. The policy also outlines an employee's obligations to disclose if there is use of potentially impairing medications, opioids, medicinal cannabis. Employees will now also be obligated to disclose any drug or alcohol problems prior to there being an issue, as these are recognized illnesses for which early intervention and treatment may support rehabilitation. Disclosure post-incident will not mitigate the employee's behavior, and discipline up to dismissal could result. The policy also speaks to reasonable suspicion testing and when the employee may be required to submit to drug alcohol testing. Financial impact is not known at this time, depending on employees disclosing any drug or alcohol problems prior to there being an issue, as these are recognized illnesses, or any issues arise that would impact the township's budget. And my recommendation is that council accept the policy for review to be discussed at the next council meeting for approval, and that the policy be circulated to employees for review prior to adoption. Thank you.
Any questions, comments? Councillor Clark?
This is just a real minor thing. Like, I know that provincial, there's a policy with respect to smoking cigarettes on municipal property or distance from buildings, parks, playgrounds, whatever. So I'm looking under prohibition against possession of alcohol or drugs. Now, I'm not a vapor myself, but I think vaping is not an illegal activity, and it's listed here under the prohibition against possession of alcohol or drugs. So I didn't know if that is something that's accurately in there or not.
Through the mayor, it is accurately stated, only because cannabis, what we're trying to state is it's not allowed in the workplace.
But, but how come you don't list cigarettes down there?
Because cigarettes isn't a drug and it's not alcohol.
Right, and vaporizers are not a drug, it's that...
Right, but it's the drug that goes into vaping. So we're not condoning vaping, we're condoning what's being used in vaping. So cannabis can be used in vaping.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
No, that's okay. So I think it's an oil. I don't know for certain, but
these kids are using juice or something
Yeah.
in it or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the cannabis is an oil that can be put into the
vapor.
Vaping machine. I don't even know what it is, but
It's a vape pen, is what they're called.
thank you, a vape pen.
Okay.
And it's not condoning that you can't vape. What it's condoning is using cannabis in the workplace.
Okay.
In the vape pen.
But this just says possessing the vaporizer. So.
Well, we will have a smoking bylaw, and again, that's something that we need to
maybe you'd
look
have
into.
to piggyback that with the
smoking and
one too.
vaping will be included in that
Yeah.
bylaw.
Okay.
We are under the county bylaw for no smoking.
Right.
However, we need to kind of hone in onto our municipal properties when it comes
Right.
to no smoking, and vaping will be included in that bylaw or policy.
Councillor McKinnon?
Through you to Jennifer, I just wondered if we should pass this along to the county solicitor to get his input. I know for just cause, it's really difficult to prove just cause now, and I'm just hoping we've covered all the bases.
Well, they probably have a policy in place with it.
And this would be taken from that to some extent?
Yeah.
I'm assuming, Jennifer, you looked at a lot of the other...
Yes, a lot of policies, and this was the best one that, without getting very specific and without getting specific with like a discipline policy, because we don't have a discipline policy. So basically it's to say, as a workplace, we don't allow alcohol or drugs on the premises while at work.
So through the mayor, Jennifer, so just for clarification, it wouldn't come under this policy, it would be somewhere else. Our responsibility, do we have a responsibility to provide rehab?
We would,
Is that legislated, or
yes,
is it covered
that's
off
under
in
the
there?
Employment Standards Act,
That's
where
okay.
as soon as an employee discloses that they have an addiction, because an addiction is an illness, as an employer, we would have to offer them something.
Mm-hmm. Does that extend to council too?
Sure.
I don't know, I'm just...
Just
I don't have any
Actually, under our
secrets.
policy, it does not.
Oh,
We don't
okay.
have them. We don't have them covered under our benefit package, but there
Okay.
are options for council that we can discuss.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just causing trouble, sorry. And we'd have to be careful of privacy issues too on
Yep.
all of that, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's any other questions or comments at all, you can send them off to Jennifer, because we'll be
Okay.
reviewing that, and then for approval, I'm assuming at the next meeting or
Yeah.
sometime.
We have a
Yeah.
staff meeting tomorrow, so these two policies, this one and the next one, will be going to each staff member, and they'll be given till February 1st to review and provide comment to myself.
Sorry, one last question.
Yep.
Just a yes or no answer. Do the volunteer firemen and the road guys, given that they're operating equipment, are they required to have an annual physical?
No, not
Okay.
I don't know that answer, but
Through the
Public
mayor,
Works Manager Jeff might.
to have a commercial license, there is places in that you have to get retested, eyes, medical now. So to have that license, and it's their responsibility to keep that license. So it's part of the agreement for them working here.
Okay.
So that's their responsibility to do that medical.
And
So
who
we
follows up with that checking?
The license.
They won't have a
will-
license.
Okay.
Yeah, they just
Thank you.
won't, they just will lose their license if it's not followed. So
Yeah.
Based on the qualifications, and those have changed in recent years.
it
Yeah,
just
I'm sure.
changed for a D license for the crew for the crew next door. The minimum license that they're required to have is a D, and that just changed that now they have to have a physical. I think it's every 3 years. Don't quote me
Okay.
on that, but I believe it's every 3 years.
So there's a check and balance in place.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
I just had a question following up with that. Is there anyone on staff? The reason I'm going to ask this question, in a neighboring municipality, they had an issue where they were, checking to make sure the licenses were up to date, or there was, nothing wrong. Do we, as staff, follow up and check? I know that what you're saying is to have that license, you need to do the physical and to do all those things, but are we following up every so many months or every so many years to make sure that they actually have that license?
Mr. Mayor, and I've checked through the records that when I came here, because I haven't hired anybody,
Yeah.
they're required to show their license and give a copy of it when they're hired. But as of now, we don't follow up. I can't speak for the fire department. I'm just speaking from the road department. We don't do driver abstract on a regular basis. We usually would need some sort of reason to check.
Okay.
But I don't know about the fire department. That's just commenting on public works.
Okay. And then the reason I ask is because I know in a neighboring municipality they did their regular check-in. One of their employees did not have a license at the time. So just something that maybe we should have
Well, I
looked
think-
into as a
I think from an HR perspective, it's due diligence on our part, because if there was ever an accident and there was a lawsuit, we would be held accountable for that, so perhaps we can table that at a later date to add that to HR.
Okay. Is there any other questions about the workplace drug and alcohol policy that is being reviewed? Seeing none, a motion then. Councillor Brody and Councillor McKinnon, all those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried.
My last report is regarding another policy, workplace violence and harassment, and it's in need of updating since 2014. And the reason for updating this policy is I'm working on a council staff relations policy, and that's from Bill 68 as well, that has to be implemented by March 1st. So with talking with the CAO, it was thought best that since council's already adopted a council code of conduct and a staff code of conduct, it probably would be best to update our workplace violence and harassment policy and have all three policies incorporated with a council staff relations policy. A lot of a council staff relations policy, it's already sort of outlined in your code of conduct with council and your code of conduct with staff, and then it's outlined in your workplace violence and harassment policy when staff or council member feels that they've been harassed in the process. So this policy is to update what we currently have, and attached to that are the two policies that we currently have. The financial impact at this point, there isn't any, but if we did receive a complaint, it would depend on how it's investigated, whether we'd have to go to an outside source for that. And my recommendation again is just to accept, council receive what has been presented, and that it goes to the employees for comment prior to the next council meeting for approval. And I apologize, I would talk about my report, but I can't get it to load
Also
again.
moved.
Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. Okay. That's everything?
That is everything, yes,
Perfect.
thank you.
Okay, on to our next staff report from our CO Treasurer, Kathy.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. The first item is the invoice approval list, January 11th, 2019 to January 17th, 2019, in the amount of $28,627.04.
Okay, is there any questions on the accounts? Nope. So, motion for approval.
Also
Okay,
moved.
Councillor Clark and Councillor McKinnon. All those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried.
The next report is in regards to inquiry from Councillor Clark at our last meeting. Just give you an idea of what we look at when we have the Property Standards Bylaw 60 of 2002, the Tidy Yard Bylaw 35 of 2015, and our current comment, concern, and complaint form. And these are the bylaws that we have in place today. You approved it being the committee of the Property Standards Committee should there be any complaints, because we do have to be prepared if there is any that do come in. As you will see, the Property Standards Bylaw applies to all the lands in the township with authority from Section 15.1 of the Ontario Building Code Act. Sections 3 to 6 of the bylaw provide for the minimum standards to be upheld, and this bylaw is geared more specifically to buildings and structures. So what the minimums you're requesting inside buildings, what structures should have inside. Section 7 provides for the payment of a fee to appeal an order issued under the bylaw. Section 8 provides the authority to establish a Property Standards Committee. There just seems to be a lack of clear process to be followed in regards to achieving compliance and those timeframes to resolve. There's also no indication of any penalties for non-compliance or for the collection of costs related to the issuance of an order under this section of property standards. So what happens is, if there is a complaint and council moves forward on a complaint, once we get past the property standards appeal and they've taken no action, it has to be forwarded to our solicitor for action. So that's where the big downfall is. It goes off to a solicitor, then it goes to small claims court, and it can take quite a bit of time to get things resolved. Whereas if we have a bylaw with a firm process in place, gives the timelines for compliance, what's going to happen if you don't comply, all of that will be in place, and we'll be able to move forward with complaints on a more timely basis. The Tidy Yard Bylaw 35 of 2015 specifically relates to land and does not include any buildings. The Tidy Yard Bylaw only applies to lands that are not zoned and used for agriculture. So any lands within the general agricultural A zone of the zoning bylaw are exempt. So that's predominantly most of the properties within the township. So that is a pitfall in this, in that if you're zoned agricultural, there's nothing we can do to make you clean up your property. You can have as many derelict vehicles and things on the property. So we have to look at that and ensure that we're dealing with a residence to a residence and a farm to a farm, so that we're not treating agricultural land different than residential in a built-up hamlet area. The intent of the bylaw is just requiring the land to be kept clean and clear of refuse and debris, as well as to keep the grass under control. The infractions can generally be observed from the street distance, so the bylaw enforcement officer does not need to enter a building to take care of these infractions. He can visibly view it from outside. As this is a more recently drafted bylaw, there are sections which address the time frame for compliance and what action will be taken if not completed, and it does include the right to recover our costs. The Tidy Yard Bylaw does include Schedule A, which is a specific complaint form. The form is required to be completed and signed by the person making the complaint. There is also a requirement for the person receiving the complaint to sign and indicate who the complaint was referred to for action. And that's just to ensure that there's a flow through our system. And we are recommending that both bylaws be reviewed. And as advised, action taken on property standards and Tidy Yard bylaws are on a complaint basis. The current practice to begin an investigation under either bylaw requires a written complaint to be filed. It doesn't say who has to file it, but a written complaint is required. The financial impact, the internal review by the clerk and chief building official are considered part of their regular duties. It will be recommended that prior to adopting the new property standards and Tidy Yard bylaws, the township solicitor review and provide any comment. This will be a cost to the township to implement. Costs related to property standards and Tidy Yard issues will be addressed through the applicable bylaw with direction provided on what costs can be recoverable from the property owners. And it's recommending that you receive this report as information.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Okay, Councillor McKinnon?
Just a comment. I agree with the administrator's comments in regards to sending it to the solicitor, because it's going to likely end up in court and could be quite costly to the property owner plus the municipality. So I agree with your statement there.
Okay. Councillor Clark?
I'd like to thank the CAO for preparing all that information, because that has been a hot button out in the community, and I really appreciate you doing all of that. Just as a follow-up, I'd just like us to sort of set a target date for when the next time we would discuss this, so that it doesn't just get lost in the shuffle. Not suggesting it will, but just so that we keep it in the forefront, that this is something that is a priority.
Happy, when are we expecting to have this back?
I haven't been directly involved in the discussions between the clerk and the CBO. I left that up to them. But if we could possibly give maybe a 3-month time frame for the initial review, for the draft bylaws to come back to council, and then we can proceed from there.
Yes.
We were looking at hopefully having something in place by the beginning of June, so the summer season, so our Tidy Yard bylaws up to date, so that as grass cutting and debris become an issue, we have at least got a good starting point. So.
Thank you. That's good.
Okay, any other questions or comments? So I also just recommend for the recommendation that we also include, I know that it's in the report, but also just so then people are only reading the minutes, that we also put in there that the bylaws, both the property standards and Tidy Yard bylaw, are to be reviewed or something at the end of the bylaw.
I will be noting the June date as discussed here, In prior discussions with Kathy, I need to get March 1st off my list first before I start working on property standards. And property standards and tidy yard is going to be time consuming because I'll have to sit down with Jeff too, and we'll have to talk about process, and then as well as sitting down with Kathy for process as well.
I'm not recommending a date.
No.
All I'm just recommending is at
It'll
the
be
end
put
of
in
the
there.
the motion.
Oh, you want it
that
right in the motion?
In the motion,
Yep.
and that staff be directed to
Yep.
review the bylaws, just so that it's
Yeah, that's
in the
good.
motion.
Just one other thing. So I know the Conservation Authority is somewhat involved with weed ordinance and stuff like that, so you may have to consult them as well when you're doing this. I don't know.
We have, through the mayor, we have a weed inspector that is appointed through the county of Middlesex,
Okay.
but that hasn't come to our attention as to who's being appointed, which I suspect will be probably by March.
April the 1st is the deadline to
Yes,
appoint
'cause
them
April
annually,
1st is the
so
deadline,
we will
yes.
have that.
Was it not
before.
historically the Conservation though that issued those?
No,
Okay.
no.
No,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm asking. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's an county appointment.
It's your appointment, and we have generally appointed the county weed inspector to
Oh, I
act on
see.
our
Oh, I'm
behalf.
sorry.
Yes,
Thanks
it
for
is a
clarifying.
municipal appointment, but we've always, the county has a fully trained weed
Yes,
inspector on
perfect.
service, so we usually employ their services through the county levy for our implications for weed control.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor
As
McKinnon.
amended.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Brody. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Next report is in regards to council remuneration. As was discussed at the last meeting, it was staff was instructed to review the current compensation and bring forward a report which outlines some of the impacts for increases. As you will see by the spreadsheet, there was a lot of information attached, and that is just recirculation of some former information, other municipalities, as well as some reports that you received. The summary is that effective January 1st, 2019, you will be fully taxed with the removal of the 1/3 municipal offers allowance as expense. So now we will be budgeting in 2019 for the cost of council for the CPP and EHT. Councillors are exempt from WSIB. The proposed, we also discussed having it reflect a 1/3 increase in the base rate, along with per meeting pay estimates provided for council to review. And in the notes, you also see that the proposal addresses conferences and reimbursement for mileage and expenses. So we're just presenting that to council for review and discussion and for direction on where you want to see your 2019 and beyond remuneration go.
Okay, first we're just going to get a motion to resolve that council receive the report on the council remuneration as prepared by and presented by the CEO Treasurer. Councillor McKinnon and Councillor Brody, all those in favor?
This is just receiving.
This is just to receive
Yeah.
it, and then we'll discuss. Yeah. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay. So discussion, which is the second part of the recommendation there, is for some direction. Councillor McKinnon?
Under the spreadsheet here, just to clarify, so you're saying that the base rate for, I'll just state for the counselor, 10,893, and that's recapturing that 1/3 allowance that we're losing. And then it's suggested that it's on a per meeting base of $155, and you're saying for 23 regular meetings, it's an additional $35.65
Per councillor.
per counselor. Yeah. So our rate would go from 81.70 to 14,458. Okay. Did you look at any other scenarios? Like, I'm wondering if we go to the base rate of 10, is that a little high, given that we would then be given our per meeting base of 100, or meeting pay of $155? So That's just my comment.
Councillor Clark.
A couple of things. So when we were discussing at the previous meeting the base rate, the 1/3 increase, we'll pick on the councillor just because that's the number in front of me. So the base rate, you're saying 1/3 increase. So my understanding is the increase, the difference lies in that now 1/3 will now be taxable. And I don't need anyone around here to disclose what their earnings are, but in the province of Ontario, I think you have to make a couple $100,000 a year to be in a 52% tax bracket. So in a worst case scenario, a person that would be in a 52% tax bracket, and that's the case for a councillor, the base rate third, if you're doing a dollar for dollar comparison year over year with just trying to make it the same, that increase would only be $16.57 instead of $27. For the deputy mayor, it would only be $31.88 instead of, it would only be, where is my numbers here? It'd be only $14.16 for the councillor, $16.57 for the deputy mayor, and then $21.58 for the mayor. If you're just doing it exactly the same, just to put you where you need to be. And then I didn't realize, like maybe you're just throwing this all out here for discussion, but the per meeting, I didn't think that was for council meetings. When we discussed it, I thought we said the base rate increase was for the council meetings, and then the proposed per meeting rate is for additional meetings outside of council to reflect the fact that certain people sit on certain committees and get paid, and other people go to other committees and do not get paid, just to make it equal. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Okay. Councillor Brody, any comments?
So basically your proposal, you kind of analyzed other townships, obviously, and that's all in here. So from what I've seen, comparing with the others, I didn't put much time into this at all, but it basically brings us evenly with most around, from what I can see. I don't know if I'm missing something there or not.
Well, I think there's a historic, I think we're seeing a cultural shift out there, whereby in the past, it has always been a volunteer job with a stipend, whereas now I see across the province, and even in the notes made by, I don't know if it was in the county or if it was in the municipal survey, where it's more looked at as an actual job, like a part-time job, and in some municipalities, a full-time job. So that's something the constituents have to get their head around, that there is been a cultural shift. That would be my observation. Whether I agree with it or disagree, it's irrelevant. That's just a factual thing.
And then just a few thoughts, if I could. I think when you're comparing the proposed amount for 2019, I think we're getting closer to what it should be. I think I just I kind of toss this around to other county councillors to say, hey, this is what we're looking at. What is yours? And I did some research of what theirs is as well. They just some of the feedback that I got was that we're getting close to what it should be, but at the same time they were also stating that the councillor and deputy mayor are higher than, for example, in North Middlesex. I believe it's the councillors and deputy mayor is around the 10 to 12,000, and then the mayor is 23,000. So they were saying that it's good that you're increasing, but at the same time, it's for the job description and what's going on, it may not be in line with what it could be in comparison to other municipalities. For the meeting rate, I think I'm kind of in the same mindset as Councillor Clark, that we need to set the base rate based on the 23 meetings or 22 meetings, whatever we typically have in a year, and then anything above and beyond that would be at the special meeting rate. That's kind of what my thought is. If you say that the base rate is for the mayor, 16,000 or 12,000 for the deputy mayor, or councillors 10,000, you're not really being transparent to the public, because they believe that's what it is to be sitting around this horseshoe, and realistically it's that amount at the very end, because when you add in all the meetings type of thing. So in my mind, I would like to see it more so a base rate, like the other municipalities, and then anything above and beyond, meaning the budget meetings or the emergency meetings or a special council meetings, whatever it would be, that would make sense to have that in there. And then the other thing I just want to touch on, and I'm very happy that this is in there in the notes section, which is the annual flat fee of the $500 to offset travel to regular meetings and mandatory internet for agendas. I'd like to see more investigation into how we come about that number. For myself, for county council, we get paid for the expense for mileage coming and going to county council meetings, and that's based off of your location. So taking that and just looking at what that would be for my house to here, a meeting that's 40 kilometers round trip. So I took that just the same as I would at county council, and if you take that for the 23 meetings, that's $460. So that would be $40 remaining for internet. So I think we need to be looking into that a little more, just have it so that it's even. I think, if we had a councillor living right in the village here, Adelaide Village, that doesn't really work. I think we just need to look at it, on a, not a case by case basis, but a councillor by councillor basis as to how we come up with that number. I'd like to see it, if we're going to do the, to recoup the cost of the whole internet and travel. I think travel should be, if we're going to do that, it should be exact. And I think for internet, we should pick a number, because the problem is that in 4 years or next year or the next year, council's going to ask, how do we come up with that number? And I think right now it's just a number that is put on there, and we won't be able to, in 2022, whoever's sitting around the council horseshoe, they're going to say, well, what about that line there? And they go, internet is X amount, you never know what it's going to be, and it doesn't really work. So that's my thought, is that we need to look at that expense line for the travel, if we want to do that or not, and then the internet. And then I would like to see the remuneration looking more so like what North Middlesex has. I think that's all I wrote down. Yep. Councillor Clark?
So are all councils, so they're basically, like, from your experience as a warden, everybody's going through the same process, correct?
Yeah. And the only one that is doing kind of a full review, and I think we need to decide on something, maybe not tonight, but one thing, the hard part is that everyone's kind of just picking numbers. There's no real system. It's very hard. And Luke and Adolph, they are getting a report done by Mary Ann Love, and they're doing a whole grid review. And in that grid review, they're also doing a council review as well. So I don't know if we want to wait or piggyback on that, or do our own investigation, because the hard part is that we're just picking a number, and I think right now it's just kind of 1/3. It's hard, yeah.
And I'd also like Mary Ann Hendricks, Deputy Mayor, to weigh in on it as well. I think everybody should be given a chance to speak to it.
So, and I think for me, I don't know about you, Betty, and with looking at the pay that we got compared now in comparison to last term, I went, oh boy, with the CPP taken off and the one and all that kind of stuff, I went, we're underpaid. So
see, I didn't realize they take CPP off and all that. So
yeah. So it obviously has to be looked at. We just need to make sure that we're not just picking a number out of the sky.
I agree. I think there's enough municipalities around. You should be able to compare and piggyback, like you say, on some of them. I mean, we're not Strathroy. We're not as big as that. We're not, even Thames Center. They're a lot more responsibilities than we do. So this shouldn't be too hard, but yeah, I think we'll maybe put it off a little bit yet. We do have a missing rates.
So what all do we want Kathy to look into? I've already kind of stated the whole travel.
The travel thing is easy to figure out.
Yeah.
Where we all live, and
But I like your idea of documenting it so you know how the number was arrived at,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because otherwise no one's gonna remember.
Mhm.
And we have to be transparent to the public so they know how we've come up with this.
I think I do like the idea of, so, like, you know, we all agreed to, or got voted in to be 20, whatever meetings it is, correct? And then just have an extra for extra meetings, I guess. I'm in agreement with that too.
Cause that covers off, cause when you go to conferences, those are extra meetings, right?
Yes.
And so that would be covering in that number there, correct? So, yeah, so you're not gonna know what that number is from a budget until you know who's going to which,
Exactly.
but yeah, as long as that's stated.
And just for myself, and I'll say this publicly, is that I think when you're with the mayor and deputy mayor and councillor, for the mayor's position, I think that the mayor in Adelaide Metcalfe should not get paid any less than a councillor elsewhere in the county, or the deputy mayor elsewhere in Middlesex County. That's just my opinion. I don't think it's right that in one municipality that they're getting paid less than the deputy mayor in Middlesex Centre or in wherever it is. That just doesn't make any sense to me. You know, the responsibility of the head of council is of such that I think that if you compare that to any other municipality in the county, where a deputy mayor is getting, you know, close to 20,000 or whatever it would be, it doesn't make any sense that in Adelaide Metcalfe it would be less than that. So that's just my thought, and obviously I have one vote in whatever council wants, but I just want to state that publicly, that to me it does not make any sense that that would be the case, especially a councillor in a neighboring municipality. So.
The county has no real way in on this, obviously, right? Like, this is just all each township can vote on whatever they.
Yeah.
You can go on some municipalities' websites where they've made a recommendation. I don't know if it's actually the draft farm, I don't know if it's been approved or not, but it was I thought I read it somewhere.
So
Yeah, there's a lot more work than I realized, but anyway, that's okay.
okay. Anything else that that Catherine jot down to look into?
I guess it just, you know.
I believe it's a page.
Charging after
Okay.
fire building's not gonna blow up. Okay.
You know, to me, as long as we're in alliance with other municipalities, I mean, I don't really have a problem. But I think maybe we should just take some more time.
I
And then
think
one
that
thing
I
you-
definitely-
And then, you know, even if we take time, in my mind, it should be retro back to the, you know,
For sure.
anyways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so why don't we just take a little bit of time and get it right and go from there?
So kind of would you like the motion to.
Well, if there is any specific direction, that would be good. If there's another municipality that you feel strongly that what they've said is something we should be comparable to, do you want to just compare to Middlesex? Do you want to compare to Middlesex, Lambton? You know, like we could keep going out, and then we had 12, I think, municipalities that we've already looked at. So we need to narrow our focus on what you want to see. So you want to see the travel at your actual rate. So if we can move those out, we can eliminate things or give you estimates on what we would expect. So travel to and from all council meetings would be part of your package. Your regular pay includes all of your base rate is now going to include all of your regularly scheduled council meetings as per the procedural bylaw. And any special or emergency meetings are now going to be outside of that remuneration, outside of the base rate. So we will work on a figure. Now the 155 is based on what the county currently pays.
That's a good rule.
That was just, it seemed to be about an average rate in the area. There's a lot that are higher, but they have no base rate. They just get per meeting pay as opposed to the blended issue. So we'll look at keeping the 155 as a starting point for discussion going forward. And I guess it's just if you're satisfied with the other things that are there, that your conferences, there's not going to be a limit on the conferences. A lot of municipalities do have a limit on either the number of conferences you're allowed to attend or a dollar value in attending. Problem with that is wherever they are, some places are more expensive. Going to Ottawa is more expensive to go to a conference than going to Toronto just for the travel alone. So if you're satisfied with note 5, we can leave that there, and at least you have some direction going forward on what you're going to get for your council expenses when you go to a conference. So you get a per diem, which would be equivalent to the meeting rate. Plus, we would also, as far as practicable, we'll pay the registration ahead of time, we'll pay the accommodation ahead of time. You get your mileage as your travel is reimbursed, whether you want full travel reimbursement or a lot of municipalities go with the most economical method. So if flying is more economical than driving, you would get your reimbursement for your flight, kind of thing. So if that's something the council wants to see incorporated in there, we can do that as well.
The only other thing, that if you're going to move to adopt this sort of structure, if you will, this might not be popular, but anyway, given that if the base rate is going to be based on 23 meetings, I would suggest that if you do not attend one of those meetings, that it should be deducted from that, because you shouldn't be compensated for something you didn't participate in. And I recognize that you do read ahead of time and whatever, but if you're not actually here and there's not a mechanism in place to phone in or be on Facebook to participate in the meeting, then I would suggest that you be docked if you're not at the meeting.
So,
There is a mechanism available. The council made that decision when we reviewed the procedural bylaw previously. It can be brought back to this council, but there is a mechanism in the Municipal Act to be able to participate in a meeting remotely. You are not eligible to vote in any votes that are taken, but you're able to provide input at the meeting via teleconference or whatever method the council chooses to allow you to participate. So there is that mechanism available for council members. That it was previously decided when that became available not to incorporate that in our procedural bylaw. But we can go back to that procedural bylaw and have that amended to allow participation. You're allowed to participate but not to vote because you're not present for voting.
So then I would, not to cause trouble, but I would say that then there would be a different rate paid to being here in person as opposed to phoning in. Anyway, that's just for consideration.
To me, that's maybe getting, I know it sounds politically correct that, if you miss one, but there's a lot of work behind the scenes too. It's not just so much sitting here for an hour or two. I mean, I don't think we need to make things more complicated, too complicated, right? If we come up with a base rate, I mean, if somebody's, all of a sudden, somebody doesn't show up for 2 or 3 months, well, then there needs to be.
Well, there's a mechanism in place for that too.
Right, so, I mean, I don't think that will happen, but I mean, I just don't like to see things too complicated. I mean, just keep it simple. It's not,
Just going back to the conferences, I think one thing that I'd like to see added is that if there's a member of council that attends a conference, that when they come back to the next following meeting, that they have a report.
Oh, they don't do that now?
It's not, you don't have to.
Mandatory.
Oh,
So,
it is on other boards.
yep.
Okay.
And then just to speak to what Councillor Clark was saying, if that's the case, then really the proposal that Kathy's put together, which is the base plus the meetings on top, is I think what you're kind of looking at. Except for what you were stating was kind of the opposite, which is the base, and then if you don't attend the meeting, then subtract an amount.
On the base.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm only one voice, so
Yeah.
that's why I'd like the
Yeah.
deputy mayor to be here to also
Exactly,
give
right.
her input, because everybody looks at it differently, right? So.
Yeah. Okay, is there anything else to bring back?
If Kathy's fine with, that's enough recommendation.
That's enough.
We'll revise this and we'll come back with some more and possibly how that compares to several local municipalities. We will probably narrow the focus so that it's municipalities more in proportion to our size. So you can have that, and you'll have that to compare to, and what the budget impact is when you do that.
So you're gonna motion of some sort?
Likely that we revise the schedule and come back with more comparative information.
Okay. Mover and seconder. Councillor Brody and Councillor McKinnon. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
So the next report is in regards to our strategic plan meeting, and I've put together what I took from the meeting and what council seemed to focus on in regards to what priorities there would be. I've also included under the previous, the final report there is the strategic plan priority setting framework. That's the same framework that was used to start the 2015 review. So I've used the same framework, so we're not adjusting that in any way. So as you review, is there anything specifically we're looking at priorities and whether council agrees with the priorities and the timelines? If we could, we would do everything in 2019, but it's not going to be possible based on staffing and other things. But we're looking at specifically the priorities and the timelines, and that the task is relevant to what council discussed. So I don't know if you want to go through each one on an individual basis, or is there any area that council saw that there was a real issue with the either the priority assigned or the timeline or the task itself?
Do you want to do just councillors stating your thoughts, or do you want to go with each priority
Are we on,
step by step?
Are we on the draft right now?
Yes.
Okay. Under growing our economic through diversified, under section C, the possible longer-term development of Kerwood Road and Highway 402 interchange. Since we don't own any property down there and it's agriculture related, is this something that maybe we should look at dropping from our strategic plan, or does everyone still feel it's applicable to have maybe a good lock key gas station and restaurant coming off of the interchange there?
I mean, the idea sounds great if it happened, but what's the chances are? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's one where if we can, when we do our official plan review,
Move it out.
and to see if we can get it dedicated in our official plan, then it's a great opportunity. But if we're not able to get that designation in our official plan approved by county council, then there's no sense in having that in there.
So I didn't see anything here for, I thought we felt that it was, or maybe it was just me, a priority with respect to sidewalks on 81 Highway and on Napperton, or is that under infrastructure?
If I may, it's under 1.3 in the blue section, number 1, growing our economy through a diversified economic development plan. The strategy to improve township roads and infrastructure. They're considered part of infrastructure. When you start to get into specifics as to what you want to see in there, I mean, we could put in that we want sidewalks, and we could find that the cost is so prohibitive that it may not be feasible at certain points to put those sidewalks in. So that's included with the infrastructure to come up with a plan, because we have to start planning for that. Right. So the plan would include, as we get our strategy, to commit to start engineering, start finding out what we need to do to actually have those sidewalks put in there, and then make those decisions based on that strategy that once you get those information. So that will be part of the, maybe instead of just particularly increasing the number of tar and chip road services and improving safety or pedestrian safety or something to that effect, cycling and pedestrian safety, because we may be able to dovetail with the cycling plan that's coming up. We may be able to work together with the county in some aspects, but perhaps maybe instead of just tar and chip road surfaces, we put it into cycling and pedestrian safety.
I'd like to see that in there, and you've given it an A as a top priority?
Yes.
Okay.
Because if we're going to do this, sidewalks do take a long time. They're going to take some engineering, there's going to take some planning, and community involvement as well. It's not something we just want to throw in there and say, so it does take some time. So if we want to get this underway, I classify that as an A priority. And then we can at least start with our asset management, and our budget starts to reflect that this is a priority and this is what we want to see.
Perfect. So I just, for the record, wanted that stated that that would look into that area, and that's a priority to start that process.
Any other comments, questions, concerns?
So, and if I may, I will speak to another one. We did have the fully implement a strategic marketing and branding strategy that actively supports and advances the township economic development plan. But nowhere in there do we have to develop an economic development plan. So I think that maybe we should evolve that to not just necessarily advances the economic and supports or implements the township economic development. We need to get an economic development plan in place. So I'm not sure where council feels that should fit in, but we want to advance it, and yet we don't have a plan in place. So it needs to be put in there somewhere, and I'm not sure what council's looking at for priority on that issue.
Well, and to that, I think we were talking about having Carafin from the county come to give us some input into that as well.
And PP Monty McNaughton as well.
For the natural gas,
And with that, we also really don't have a marketing and branding strategy.
No, we don't.
You know, we have the logo and the signs approved, but we don't have an actual
plan in place.
Yeah.
I think that's an ongoing thing.
And that would that also be website and that type of thing, Kathy, or where is that kind of smushed
No,
in?
the website is under 3, enhancing township governance and operations, and it I've kind of kept that in there to significantly improve access to township resources, both on-site and through technology related to meeting agendas and minutes plans. I'd like to see, we should have that website incorporated in there because it is important that we get our website back up to date. It is a somewhat archaic website. It's not as fluid, and doesn't operate as nicely as some other websites for municipalities out there. So I think there's a lot of improvement that way with using our website to improve it. So we could actually have that as part of our, to improve access to the township resources and improve the township website through the township website, possibly, if that sounds effective.
Councilor McCain?
But just to comment on the website, I think we have to keep it simple, because a lot of them, you go to them and you can't find things. It's hidden under some other little pocket area, and that was one of the problems that we had in the past, was some of the reporting wasn't transparent. And so I hope we don't go back into that. I'd like to keep it simple for people to use.
Yeah, I think ours is more complicated now. There's a lot of hovering and not being able to move too quickly, and I think that's a detriment to us. I think we need to have things that are right there in front of people as opposed to having to hover to find things. So Jennifer's done a wonderful job in updating our website and making things more readily available as opposed to having to go and look into different departments. So we're trying to move away from compartmentalizing and departmentally to making it more available quickly and quicker, so we'll
I've
add to
been
the
to other
website there.
Middlesex County sites, and there are some good ones out there, like Park Hills and stuff.
Yes.
And I'll also add that our website is not user-friendly for iPads or phones or anything like that, because of the whole hovering thing, and it's because it's with a phone or with an iPad, it's tap. You can't. So some of the contact you can't actually get to on your phone or iPad.
That's right, I experienced that firsthand.
Under the steps to improve council governance practices and staff team, I think we have done a lot working towards that by our hiring of the clerk and the newer assistant for Kathy. I think that's hopefully freeing up some of Kathy's time and enabling her to do some of the treasury functions in a more appropriate time frame. So I think we're working on it. We have worked on it.
Yes.
And I think that we need to continue to focus that we are working all together. We're not working against council. We're trying to implement. When we try to give council the best advice that staff can give them, so you make informed decisions, and then we implement those decisions based on what your guidance is. So that's something that has to keep on going, and it has to be a priority, because if you let that lax, then communications start to fall down, and then things tend to not get completed, and we don't want that to happen. We want to keep moving progressively and moving forward. So,
Councillor McKinnon?
My comment on 3.4 was to look into our partner or our neighbor, North Middlesex, to see about water possibly coming to Kerwood, because it's going to take water to Kerwood before it really becomes
Thriving community.
yes.
yeah.
Yep.
Again, we didn't get into specifics, but we could find it, because we want to make sure we keep all of our options open, and we don't want to specify one municipality. So that's covered under 1.2, to actively advocate and to take steps where viable to increase natural gas, high-speed internet, and water services distribution. So we want to make sure that as we see our areas of growth and where we have potential, we start looking into some options, as opposed to saying everything's too expensive. We want to keep our options open, and as water services become available, we want to take advantage of those and be able to use them.
Good.
And without narrowing it too far, so, because there is options from other areas as well, so.
Councillor Brody, any questions or comments at all?
No, that's good.
There's just one in here I wanted to address, which was with the building our community, the 2.2, which is the pursue opportunities to develop a potential community hub in Kerwood. I think the timeline to me should be bumped forward. I agree. There's it's nice to do everything kind of at once, but I think when we're looking on the next one, which is a 2.3, which is to undertake improvements at the Kerwood Park, it depends on what we're doing with the community hub, and I think we need to be looking into the whole hub idea and relocation or whatever it would be at the same time that we do the improvements. That's kind of
Make it part of the conversation.
yeah, making it because I think it needs to be almost 2019 and beyond, and at a certain point we have to say yes or no to the whole hub thing. And we need to move, past it so we can do certain things. And I think we're waiting until 2021, 2022 to decide whether or not, say, we move the municipal office, or we're doing a building or whatever, like a community hall there or something. I think it's kind of waiting too late. So I would like to see that brought forward even to like 2019.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point.
Yeah.
It all kind of goes together, right?
Yeah. And then realistically bumping it from a priority C to a A. Because then we just have to decide, and then at a certain point it's an A until we say
No.
yes, and then it continues to be an A, and if it's a no, then realistically it's gone.
So you want that changed to an A in 2019? Is that, it doesn't quite follow your framework policy that we had discussed earlier, so, and again, that gives us, if we're going to do that, then that's something we have to start budgeting for in 2019. So if you want that to happen, then we need to, that's something we'll put in the budget for this year.
Yeah, I think it just is too tight with the 2.3. Right, so I mean, we better look at the big picture, not just small.
Well, I think it has to be part of the conversation totally, with both parcels.
So I'm sure that the Optimist Club or somebody will be coming, knocking our door, asking us what we're doing with the hall or what we're doing with something, and at a certain point we need to have a strategy as what we're doing. I think that's part of it.
So you want those put back together? Because at the meeting it was that those were two separate important points. One was the park and improving the park, and the other one was the hub.
Well, they are two separate, but they're still both the same priority, I think, is what.
Yeah. So I think all I'm saying is that yes, we are going to, the plan is to improve the Courwood Park, but at the same time we need to decide, are we doing a hub, and if we are doing a hub, does it get incorporated with the Courwood Park improvements in that location, or does it not? We do something somewhere else, but I think it needs to be done all at once, kind of thing, or a decision has to be made, really realistically in 2019. And then, maybe I missed it, Kathy, is the hub also the whole roads department discussion as well?
Yes, that's all part and parcel of that, yes.
Perfect. Okay, is there anything else we'd like to add or change or remove?
Just want to make sure the sidewalks were on there.
Perfect. From us,
actually, that's we can just revise it. It'll just come back at the next meeting. So there's really no direction. It's just to discuss it. Was to get some discussion on what. Make sure I get the feedback correctly back from the meeting. So we'll put that back together for the next one, and hopefully we'll be prepared to set that as our matrix, and then we can work backwards and fill in the rest of the strategic plan for going forward.
Perfect. So we don't need a motion then?
No.
Okay. Is there anything else, Kathy?
No.
Okay, is there any questions for Kathy?
Road load, reduce load restriction, do we do that or?
We haven't come to bylaws
Oh,
yet.
okay. We just did point of the value, livestock value.
We haven't done any of the bylaws, we just appointed,
Oh, we
and we
just
just have to do the, yeah.
Okay, I'm confused here, sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, there's,
Okay, so the next on our agenda is our closed session. So we have a motion then, resolve that council, the CEO treasurer, the clerk, and the public works manager, we do, move into closed session under section, pursuant to section 239.
Actually, the public works manager wasn't staying for this part.
Okay, I was, yeah.
No, yeah. He's had a long day so far, so I was hoping we'd get him out of here in good time.
surprise, you might be up all night.
So we have a motion to resolve the council, the CEO treasurer, and the clerk move to close session pursuant to section 239, 2A, the security of property of the municipality or local board, and C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board at 9:08 p.m. Mover and seconder, Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Clark. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Oh, thank you. Oops, are we in another close that? Okay, so we've just resumed our open session from our closed session under the 239(2)A and C, and I believe we have a rise and report.
Yep, resolve that staff be directed to investigate as discussed in closed session.
Now, does Megan Ann still share this part?
Yeah.
Or do I?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
You're back
So,
on
You're
just-
back, yeah.
Okay, so, mover and
So I'll
seconder?
move the motion.
Moved by Councillor McKinnon and seconded by Councillor Brody. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okey-dokey. Other business. Is there anything for other business at all?
One thing I wanna just ready to bring stuff up. Like, just going back to the grass cutting stuff at the park. Do we need to reopen that somehow? I mean, it's January. We leave this going on until March. Nothing gets done until April. What can we do? Like, how can we go about that?
I think there should be a date set where somebody that has a one-on-one with whoever the grass cutting thing to reestablish what the expectations are.
Yeah.
And there should be, it should be before April when the grass does, just depending on weather, right? I think
I
that's
think we
good.
just need to review that, we're not, I don't think anybody, maybe even him, is happy with how it all just needs
Just
to
a
be done.
reminder, yeah.
And I'm not, and if he basically says, I need more money to do more cuttings, can we bring that back up and improve? Like, I'm just looking for how that could go. I mean, it has to be improved, there's no question about it.
Well, because didn't you, Kathy, say the contract was a minimum?
Yes.
Like a minimum cut, so
And
it's been
that's
covered,
what's,
right?
yeah, so he's making it, like he's doing what he's saying he can do, but I mean, obviously that's not enough. So that's what I mean, we need to,
Yeah.
like if he basically states, I need to get paid for so many more cuts to get it adequate, I mean, that's what we can review and approve or disapprove or whatever, but
So why don't
if we don't bring it up, it won't be, it could be the same as last year.
So why don't we just have a report then for our next meeting, and that way it can include what was approved last year.
So we know what
So
the
then everyone knows what it
expectation
is,
is, yeah.
and then we need to, that makes sense.
Because it might just be a thing where you just need, somebody needs to sit down with you and say, listen, this didn't go well, so we need to do better, and this is what we need to do, right?
Mhm.
So, or like you say, you need more, I don't know,
Yep, I don't want that.
hopefully not.
Anything else for other business?
Should I ask any more questions tomorrow?
We got lots of time, we're not at the curfew yet. Okay. Okay, if we have nothing else, and we have a few bylaws. The first one is resolved that the first and second reading be given to bylaw 9, 2019, the zoning bylaw amendment Z01, 2019, and the bylaw be signed by the mayor. Yeah, Councillor McKinnon and Councillor Clark, all those in favor? Opposed and carried. And then the resolve that all three readings of the readings be given to bylaw number 6, 2019, reduce load restriction. Number 7, 2019, appoint livestock valuer. Number 8 of 2019, appoint property standards committee. Bylaw number 10, 2019, pregnancy parental leave members of council. And bylaw number 11 of 2019, confirmed council proceedings, and that the bylaws be signed by the mayor and clerk, and the corporate seal be attached. Councillor Clark and Councillor McKinnon, all those in favor? Opposed and carried. And if there's nothing else, a motion to adjourn at 9:37. Councillor Brody and Councillor McKinnon, all those in favor? Opposed and carried.